That's why the oil pipes of Nigeria are passing through villages where poverty is worst. British Petroleum. And Nigeria has to import back its own fuel as a processed product at a price 3 to 4, 5 times more than they send it out of the country. So tell me, Nigeria, after 60 years of mining oil, why up to date you don't have a processing and a refinery to purify your oil and sell petrol to the world? No, those mines don't belong to us. The government signed a document with the British government, and it's in the constitution, it's in the law, that Britain will mine this place for the next 99 years.
One thing that keeps me puzzled, despite having studied finance and economics at the world's best universities, the following question remains unanswered. Why is it that 5,000 units of our currency is worth 1 unit of your currency, where we are the ones with the actual gold reserves? We all know the dollar is worthless, while the euro is merely charged with German intellect and technology, and maybe some Italian pasta. How can one expect donations from nations that have so little? It's super sweet of you to come with your colored paper in exchange for our gold and diamonds. But instead, you should come empty-handed, filled with integrity and honor. We want to share with you our wealth and invite you to share with us.
BRICS is a good thing. Kill the American dollar. You come to me, you want to buy gold, and then you give me papers. And then you call that business. No. And right now the economy is running on the false idea of Nixon, who removed the American dollar from being gold-based to being paper-based. So Americans don't need any backup for their economy. Or they're going to go to a photocopying machine and photocopy more papers. We are going to be reaching a time right now in Zimbabwe where all the gold that was stolen by the Europeans is going to come back to Africa. How? When we sell you our maize, we sell you our flowers, we sell you our coal. We don't want some damn pieces of paper money in our accounts. Pay in gold. Bring it back from your reserves in London, in Lisbon, in New York, in Frankfurt. You want iron ore and manganese. You want bars of gold.
Africa has built the world throughout the ages. Africa built Europe. Africa built America. Africa built Australia. Africa is building China. All the resources. You go to Europe today and you see the gold, the copper, the electricity, everything. It is from Africa. And that is why they came here and enslaved us. That is why they came here and took our minerals. That is why they are still coming here. Because Africa is the continent that has fed the world. When we talk about the mother continent, we are not simply talking about the mother continent to the extent that she feeds our own children, but she feeds the world.
And the world knows that.
And the world knows that. That's why she cannot be allowed to be free. And that is why she must wake up.
Where was the West tears and condemnation when 500,000 Tigrayans were killed in Ethiopia? Where is the cry for the 5.5 million Congolese who were being killed in war? Where was the West when 1 million people were massacred in Rwanda? Where is the world now as Sudan goes up in flames? Nowhere. Yet the same people who pick and choose who is innocent and guilty or worth caring about are the same people telling you and me about democracy and human rights and how our nations should or shouldn't live. You're the same people who wiped out the Native Americans, the same people who enslaved millions of Africans and regarded them as subhumans, the same who caused the death of more than 1 million innocent Iraqis. And to all of that, I will kindly remind you of a passage from the Holy Quran. Whoever kills an innocent person, it is as if he has killed all of humanity. Of course, this concept is quite complicated, a concept you wouldn't be able to fathom if you lacked humanity yourself.
We are now in a neo-colonial stage when the European powers are at their most diabolical, when the Americans are at their most diabolical. And how do they interfere? They interfere militarily. They ensure that you in the military are trained in Sandhurst, are trained in West Point, so they affect your mind. They interfere diplomatically. They interfere through institutions such as the IMF and the World Bank. They interfere by ensuring that our economic infrastructure is beholden to theirs through dollarization.
We don't only speak to Palestinians, we speak to peace-loving Israelis as well. And we know that there's a lot of fake news that attempts to cast Palestinians in a bad light. And it has been admitted, even from the White House spokesperson, that that statement that was made at the highest level was actually proven not to be factual. And it's important that when we speak on these matters, let us speak being honest and factual. The facts are the people of Palestine are denied the right to exist as human beings. They're denied the right to enjoy the freedoms and the rights we so love as South Africans, the rights and freedoms we fought so hard for.
How do you bomb a hospital? Even if the president of Hamas ran into that hospital, is hiding in that hospital, you can't bomb that hospital. How do you bomb a refugee camp? Even if Hamas ran into that refugee camp, you are in no position to bomb a refugee camp. Comrades, those guys are involved in ethnical cleansing. They want to wipe off the Palestinians. This is a genocide. It's an international crime, and ICC must issue a warrant of arrest against Netanyahu.
The charge of genocide is meritless. It's particularly galling, given that those who are attacking Israel continue to openly call for the annihilation of Israel and the mass murder of Jews.
Antony Blinken should be outraged, because if Israel is guilty of genocide, then not only the United States, but Blinken personally is complicit in genocide and would be hauled before a court and convicted of his role in perpetrating this genocide as well. And I think if you look at U.S. officials, aside from Biden, Blinken has been perhaps the most enthusiastic proponent of this genocide. So I find his outrage at this case before the International Court of Justice completely understandable. I'd be even more upset if I were in his shoes.
There was a great black brother named Paul Robeson, and y'all know who Paul Robeson was. Give it up for Paul Robeson. He went to the United Nations with a petition that said, "We charge genocide." He was talking about black people in the American Empire. And it is consistent to be in solidarity with South Africa, because we don't have to charge genocide. We see it with our very eyes. Day in and day out. Those precious babies, the precious men, the precious women. What kind of world are we living in? America, what kind of country? What kind of empire? All of that vulgarity, all of that bestiality, and we still have to march in Washington before the Capitol and the White House. My God. It's true. It's amazing to me. I think of Biden and Harris, Austin and Blinken and Sullivan and Kirby. I can mention all the names. And I don't speak in a spirit of hatred. I speak in a spirit of love for much more, which leads me to hate the
domination, occupation, subjugation, degradation, any form that loses sight of the humanity of people. And I say personally, divide and conquer. It's not just enabling, you're not just facilitating, you're not just coagulating and cooperating with vicious crime of genocide. That makes you war criminals yourself. You ought to be ashamed. Who do you think we are? You think that you can suppress the love that we have for our Palestinian brothers and sisters? No, you got the wrong people. I would say the same thing if they were Jewish brothers and sisters. Same thing if they were Haitian brothers and sisters. Same thing if they're Ethiopian brothers and sisters. Don't get it twisted. You're trying to have some face of morality and spirituality in a moment of overwhelming barbarity. I can hear the voice of Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass. I can hear the voices of Claudia Jones. I can hear the voices of W.P. Du Bois. I can hear the voices of John Coltrane's Love Supreme. I can hear the voices of Curtis Mayfield. I can hear the voices of Gil Scott-Heron. They're not just isolated names. They are forces in history that constitute our souls so that we can straighten our backs up. And Brother Martin, you say anytime, every day, straighten their backs up. They're going somewhere because folks can't ride your back unless it's bent. Our backs are straight. Our backs are ready. We are fortified. We ready to fight. We ready to resist with resilience. When they tell us that the claims of our South African brothers and sisters are meritless. You see, they said the names a number of times, so you know they got talking. Meritless. Have you seen Gaza? Have you seen West Bank? Not just after August 7th. Did you see it in 1948? Did you see it in 1967? Did you see it in 2008? Did you see it in 2014? And you're still looking, and all you can say is meritless. Fun. How cold-hearted and mean-spirited can you be? Have the nerve to go down to a black church where black people were crushed by some sick white supremacists. You know you were namely blowing up mosques in Gaza, blowing up churches in Gaza, blowing up places where Jesus himself was born. I'm a Christian. I'm a revolutionary Christian. I come out of the household of Irene and Clifton. I come out of Shiloh Baptist Church. I'm influenced by the Black Panther Party. Don't tell me. Don't tell me that you can see what I see and call it meritless. We'll never put up with that. We'll never accommodate ourselves to that. And that's why we call it for more than a ceasefire. We want an end to the siege. We want an end to the occupation. We want Palestinians to live a life of dignity. One last point. One last point. We get ready to march. One of these days it's gonna happen. I may not live to see it for myself, but I know I would have done all that I could to bear witness with every bone in my body But I want that free Palestine to be a place where we're able to bring together human beings in such a way that, yes, we would be concerned about Jewish safety and security. Nobody's calling for the annihilation of Jewish brothers and sisters, but you'll never have Jewish security. You'll never have Jewish safety if you don't have Palestinian security, if you don't have Palestinian safety. That's what we're talking about. We want equality. We want equality. We want equality.
Initial disrespect was inviting Joe to the church in the site of a massacre, the church of Black revolutionaries.
Another young person in the community I spoke with says, those who are focused on the protest optics don't understand the whole story.
So here's the deal with class and clergy in Charleston, South Carolina. They control the sheep, they keep Negroes asleep. The boy just did it the other day in that church. Praising Biden, upholding Biden, no matter how wicked his support of Israel is. So when it comes down to the views of the prominent religious and political leaders, it does not represent the masses of African people in Charleston. Period.
At patreon.com/secondthought. Believe it or not, the Republicans are not the only major right-wing political party in America. Of course, there are smaller conservative groups like the Libertarian Party and the Constitution Party, but for all intents and purposes, and contrary to what you've probably heard your whole life, the Democratic Party might as well join them on that list. How else could we categorize a party that blocks movement to the left, passively accepts movement to the right, and sometimes even embraces conservatism outright? In this episode, we're looking at how the Democratic Party takes advantage of the current electoral system to stop, to the best of its ability, the progress of left-wing politics and how it even actively promotes a right-wing agenda. We're talking about something called the ratchet effect. If you've been following this channel for a while, you've probably already heard me talk about the absurdly stunted American political landscape. If you're new here, the basic idea is this: American politics lean heavily to the right. On one side of the aisle, the Republican Party espouses alarmingly far-right politics, more extreme in their nature than even some notable far-right parties in European politics, like the National Rally in France and UKIP in the UK. Often left out of the story, though, is that the Democratic Party is also on the right. Perhaps not by US standards, but in the range of political ideologies, both parties are devoted to neoliberalism and the ideology's strict adherence to free international trade, austerity, and highly privatized economies. This means that at the end of the day, Democrats and Republicans disagree on relatively few things, and most of those things are minor aesthetic differences or the usual hot-button culture war topics. But stopping our analysis there ignores the special role Democrats play in the American political system. Democrats actively enable the Republican agenda. In politics, this is called the ratchet effect. The idea goes something like this. When Republicans hold power, the gears of the ratchet engage and the machine begins to move to the right, happily clicking along as policies pass, judges are replaced, and budgets are approved. Come the time when Democrats return to power, the ratchet is meant to move left. But the party acts as the pawl, immobilizing the gears, meaning the ratchet remains completely stuck until Republicans return to power and things go back to moving right again. In the real world, this ratchet effect can be seen when Democrats do any, or frequently all, of three things: passively accept movement towards the right, move to the right themselves, and block movement to the left. Let's start with that last one. It's becoming obvious that properly leftist ideas are gaining traction in the US. As I've mentioned in previous videos, more and more people are losing faith in capitalism and are looking elsewhere for options. Popularity in socialism is on the rise, and several policies Americans have typically considered left-wing, like universal health care, increased minimum wages, tuition-free college, and the federal legalization of marijuana are more popular than ever, with around 2/3 of Americans and the overwhelming majority of Democratic voters supporting them. But these policies, and many, many others, never become law. Why? Because Democrats aren't responding to the growth in popularity of leftism. In fact, they're actively resisting it. They do this in several ways. During elections, it's as simple as Democratic elites clearing the path for their more centrist candidates, like Clinton and Biden, by handing them endorsements and the keys to their more powerful fundraising apparatus. The mainstream media also heavily favors these so-called moderates, offering effectively limitless free publicity and often outright slandering the more left-leaning candidates. But it doesn't stop there. Once in government, the party's attachment to centrism only grows. We see this when Biden abandons the fight for a $15 minimum wage long before it starts, leading it to fail in the Senate. We see it in the infrastructure bill going from this to this. We see it in the complete silence of high-ranking Democrats when Amazon workers and Alabama coal miners attempt to unionize or go on strike, leaving them alone and without the support they were promised by America's so-called most pro-union president you've ever seen. Everywhere you look, the ratchet is frozen in place. They aren't fighting like hell for the little guy, they're getting in his way. Now, of course, when Republicans take control of government, the ratchet begins to move freely again. Policies get passed with purely performative resistance. Judges get appointed who uphold right-wing policies for decades, and the country continues trending towards the right. When Democrats return to office, concentration camps along the southern border become immigration overflow facilities and remain open. Immigrants are told, "Do not come." The U.S. Embassy remains in Jerusalem despite an ongoing genocide, and military budgets continue to rise. Nothing quite illustrates the ratchet effect better than the U.S. corporate tax rate over time. These are the taxes that corporations have to pay, the same way you and I do when we earn our income. Back in 2017, Trump cut taxes for both the richest Americans and corporations, while giving effectively nothing to the rest of us but the promise of an eventual, fictional trickle-down. With this cut, Trump brought the corporate tax rate from an already low 35% down to a paltry 20%, shifting the tax burden even further onto the shoulders of average Americans and away from his party's corporate donors and himself. Thankfully, Biden is bringing it back up to 25%, 28% if we're lucky, 7 to 10 points lower than where it started. Here the trend becomes clear. Year after year, Republicans push further and further for imperialist foreign policy, for xenophobic immigration restrictions, for rich Americans to hoard more and more wealth. Democrats come to appease the masses, promising they'll be different from the previous administrations, returning power to the people, but always less than they had before and never getting in the way of this greater rightward trend. This isn't to say Democrats never pass progressive legislation. They sometimes do, but it remains an exceptionally rare event, especially in comparison to the number of conservative policies that pass. And it's always less than what they promised, less than what they could theoretically achieve, and nowhere close to what would be considered progressive in other developed countries. Now, these are all situations where Democrats appear ineffective, where they try but fail to deliver on the demands of their constituents. But they can be far more harmful. Every time they gain power, Democrats adopt some new right-wing policy, pushing the left further outside the realm of acceptable politics, and allowing the right to claim even more outrageous amounts of ideological territory as it adopts, according to some, the trappings of a fascist state. We've seen this for decades. In the late 60s and 70s, it was law and order. A seemingly innocuous phrase coined by Nixon became realized in full force by Reagan's disastrous war on drugs. Law and order became one of the rallying cries of a political program that threw the black community, black men in particular, in jail with long sentences for so-called broken window crimes. Minor crimes heavily punished so that the state could showcase its power. Politicians drummed up fear of black and minority criminals while simultaneously terrorizing non-white communities with an over-militarized police force. In the 90s, Democrats latched onto this Republican program with their own narratives. You may have heard the term super predator. This super predator, a young criminal with no remorse, became the myth that glued the Democratic tough-on-crime program together. The Clinton administration in particular led its own wave of over-policing with the infamous crime bill, which included what was called 3 strikes lifetime sentencing, put more police on the streets, increased the scope of the death penalty, and of course, put more people in jail than ever before. These are not the policies of a left-wing government. Generally speaking, Democrats are quick to jump on the police state bandwagon. We've seen it when the Biden administration tries to increase police funding and deploy it against Black Lives Matter protesters. We've seen it with the passage of the Patriot Act by a Democratic-led Senate back in 2001. Over time, Democrats tack more and more right-wing politics onto their agenda, until the Democrats of today begin looking a lot like yesterday's Republicans. There are 2 main reasons the Democrats act this way. First, they rely heavily on large corporate interests. Weapons manufacturers, the pharmaceutical industry, and fossil fuel companies are some of the most influential sources of funding for both political parties, and so will necessarily drag the Democrats further to the right than their constituents and the American people in general want them to go. Just look at the Biden administration's stance on oil drilling.
You see, this morning Susan Collins says, oh, Democrats and Republicans, there's some common ground. Apparently Susan Collins thinks that guns have learned their lesson. Learn their fucking lesson. Just like the rest of the people that she capitulates to, makes excuses for. Susan Collins, we don't care about your common ground. That's not what we're concerned about. We're not concerned about common ground in the Senate between Republicans and Democrats. There's plenty of common ground out here. 90%. You dumb motherfucker, 90% of people are for a bill that your caucus is blocking. You, Republicans. Common ground, my fucking ass. A grocery store, a church, an elementary school, a hospital. What next? Restaurant? We've had those. Movie theater? We've had those too. What next? Where to next? Come on. It's a good thing bunch of you senators, Republicans, have decided that there's common ground somewhere, and these guns has learned their lesson. It really is not difficult. And it gets easier and easier every day to see exactly what is happening. Because there was a question about this gun. What kind of gun is it? Is it a shotgun? Is it a rifle? Is it a handgun? What kind of gun is it? What kind of gun is it? The media is waiting. The media is waiting. Politicians are waiting to find out if this is a military. Of course it's a military-style weapon. Why the fuck would someone take any other kind of gun into a shooting to kill multiple people? Why? Why would they do that? It's like taking a 1992 Dodge Caravan to a drag race. The fuck are you talking about? Of course, they're going to get the best weapon they can to apply the maximum amount of damage. That's the point. Well, they're mentally ill. Yeah, probably. You're not gonna do anything about that either. Common ground, Susan Collins, you dumb motherfucker.
Horrifyingly awful thing to do. It's so disgusting, dude. I fucking hate the Democratic Party as well. Why do I hate the Democratic Party? They had what, fucking 20 instances where they could have codified Roe v. Wade when they had a supermajority, when they had a filibuster-proof majority, including under Obama? They didn't do that. Ruth Bader Ginsburg could have fucking retired under Obama. Many people were demanding this. They didn't fucking do that, because that was sexist, Sweaty, so shouts out to Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She's burning in fucking hell right now. This is her goddamn legacy. Good job, Ruth. Good job, Ruth. I'm so glad that you were like, I won't die. I've only had cancer 11 fucking times. I can just go and officiate a wedding in the middle of COVID as a 97-year-old woman who's had cancer 100 times. Congratulations, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Thanks for fucking croaking in the middle of Donald Trump's presidency. That was fucking tight.
I think Leroy needs something from this guy.
Oh, he needs those devout shoulders? Isn't he a paladin?
Yeah, but that'll help him heal better. He'll have more mana.
Christ. Okay, well, what we'll do, I'll run in first, gather up all the eggs so we can kind of just, blast them all down with AoE. I will use Intimidating Shout to kind of scatter them so we don't have to fight a whole bunch of them at once. When my shout's done, I'll need Anthony to come in and drop his shout too, so we can keep them scattered and not have to fight too many. When his is done, Bass, of course, need to run in and do the same thing.
3, repeating, of course, percentage of survival.
Oh, it's a lot better than we usually do.
Alright, thumbs up.
Ready, guys?
Let's do this. Leroy!
Oh my god, he just ran in.
Save him!
Oh, geez, stick it clean.
Oh, Jesus. Let's go.
God damn it, Leroy.
God damn it. Leroy, you moron.
Leroy.
Res us.
Why do you do this shit, Leroy?
I'm trying. It's not my fault.
Leroy, you were just stupid as hell.
At least I have chicken.
Now, I probably wouldn't say this in front of Vladimir Putin, but in front of y'all, I'm gonna keep it real. United States don't need to do nothing but sit, stay tough ass down. Man, big neck ass. Hold on, French Montana. You might learn something. 3 things black folks need quit capping back. What's that? One, R. Kelly need to stay freak ass in jail for smelling like 10th grade pussy. On God. Hey, you got 2, Trey Songz did it. And 3, United States don't need to do nothing but sit they tough ass down. Come on, damn. Go for Mexico by that nigga. Hey, I got a vouch for you. They said he was a no-neck ass nigga then. Ain't he a no-neck ass nigga now? Eddie, this shit you saying ain't true. This shit low down and satanic for you to talk about Ukraine in their way. Now, if we can't keep it 1,000 wide in the barber shop, you know damn well none of our bitches wanna hear that shit. This ain't nothing but a live-ass conversation, that's all, man. Don't be talking about them folk, man. Man, you already know what's going on in the barber shop. Ain't nobody say you can talk about whoever, whatever, whenever you want to. Bill Cosby swag ass nigga. I ain't playing with a nigga ass. Nigga ass better keep walking. I tell you what, you a washing machine by that nigga. You know what? You better not never let Joe Biden hear you talk like this. Never, ever. Man, fuck Joe Biden. Oh, it might be lunching.
You have made no progress under Democrats. I don't know why you're such a slave. Figure out, what did they do for you with what you have given to the Democratic Party? All white folk have to do is smile at you and talk. Right talk. Oh, they sound so nice. Ooh. Oh, that's wonderful. And then look around and see what they do after they talk. See, they want your vote. Your vote is what they want. They can't perform. I don't care what they promise.
Rap, the thing your 50-year-old cousin still thinks he has a shot at. Rap has been around for decades, and it's gotten so mainstream, it's now even part of the Super Bowl halftime show. But now, there's a new style of rap that's blowing up. And it's gotten to the point where the mayor of New York is so concerned that he's trying to rein it in.
Mayor Eric Adams is trying to curb the violence associated with drill rap. Now, that's a branch of rap music that is about the violent side of the streets.
I had no idea what drill rapping was, but I called my son, and he sent me some videos, and it is alarming.
Don't forget, this is an argument that we've heard about rap music for decades.
Gangster rap has become incredibly popular and profitable by selling lyrics about black-on-black violence. Now that some of its stars stand accused of doing what they've been rapping about, life seems to be imitating art, so to speak. And the critics are coming out in force. Some radio stations have refused to play the most controversial rap records.
In the wake of the Rodney King verdict and the civil unrest in Los Angeles, some police officers across the country now say they're feeling threatened by the lyrics of a rap song.
Radio stations such as KACE in Los Angeles and WBLS in New York announced they would no longer play songs they considered negative.
You have the right of free speech in this country, but you don't have the right to yell fire in a crowded theater. They're yelling shoot in a community that is crowded with guns.
They don't seem to see any connection between the kind of music which they sell for profit and the kinds of problems we have in American society.
Rap opponents say they're fighting to save a generation. It won't be easy. Last night at the Billboard Music Awards in Hollywood, one of the most foul-mouthed rappers, Dr. Dre, was upheld as one of the best artists of the year.
Oh, that foul-mouthed Dr. Dre! What a disgrace! I, for one, will never buy mid-range headphones from that man. But yeah, back in the 90s, people were saying all the same things about rap music that they're saying now about drill rap music. And you find in another 30 years, they'll be saying the same thing about whatever rap is then. These crypto rappers are out of control. We don't feel safe in our own metaverse anymore. And look, please don't get me wrong, I am not saying the backlash against drill rap is exactly the same situation as the 90s. I'm not saying that. In fact, this week, Eric Adams actually sat down with a group of drill rappers to hear their side of the story, which is definitely not something that was happening a lot back then. You know, like Rudy Giuliani never sat down for a meeting with Tupac. And if he did, it was only because he was trying to find dirt on Hunter Biden. But still, the fact that we've been down this road before probably should be a reason to pause. Just pause before condemning an entire genre. Because a lot of the people that think drill rap is the cause of this violence don't realize that if you ask people in the drill rap community They say, no, it's not the cause of the violence, it's actually the other way around.
How are we taking a genre of music and saying, this is the problem in the community? How the that the problem? That's music. It's a problem that already existed before they had this genre of music. The music is the expression for trauma.
They're rapping about their reality, and they need to understand that if, for example, they were to ban drill music, is violence going to stop? It's not. So we're seeing it as they're using it as a scapegoat.
The community is like, it's like, there's no hope, there's no opportunities. No, we just making music so we could get out of these places.
The lyrics are a manifestation of what is already happening, right? They are actually living their reality, right? So if their reality was different, then they would rap about different things.
Yeah, you see, from their perspective, people upset about violence in rap music are focusing on the symptom instead of the root cause. Because you want to ban drill rap, but you don't want to ban income inequality. You want to ban drill rap, but you don't want to ban mass incarceration. You want to ban drill rap, but you don't want to ban failing schools. You want to ban drill rap, but you don't want to ban the things that lead to drill rap. And look, this isn't even unique to this issue, right? Like, attacking the symptom instead of the cause is as American as arming teachers. But just cracking down on drill rappers won't stop anything. They'll just find another way to express themselves, right? You're gonna end up creating a generation of drill podcasters. When I'm putting my enemies to sleep, I always do it on a Casper mattress. The point is, drill rappers are like any other artist. Their art is going to be an expression of what's around them. If you want to stop the music, don't emulate the same mistakes America has been making for 30 years. Emulate policies from a country that isn't producing drill rap. Like, I'm not trying to start a beef, but there's a reason that the Scandinavian drill scene ain't shit.
We always say in the Black Panther Party that they can do anything they want to us. We might not be back. I might be in jail. I might be anywhere. But when I leave, you can remember I said with the last words on my lips that I am a revolutionary. And you're going to have to keep on saying that. You're going to have to say that I am a proletarian. I am the people. I'm not the pig. You got to make a distinction. And the people are going to have to attack the pig. The people are going to have to stand up against the pig. And we are going to have to fight. We're going to have to struggle. We're going to have to struggle relentlessly to bring about some peace, because the people that we're asking for peace, they're a bunch of megalomaniac warmongers, and they don't even understand what peace means. And we've got to fight them. We've got to struggle with them to make them understand what peace means.
That politics is nothing but war without bloodshed, and war is nothing but politics with bloodshed.
On November 19th, FBI agent Roy Mitchell drew a floor plan of Hampton's apartment based on information supplied by informant O'Neill. On December 4th, at 4:45 in the morning, 14 policemen, 9 white and 5 black, raided the apartment. Deborah Johnson, 8 months pregnant, was asleep in the back bedroom next to Fred Hampton.
The first thing I remember after Fred and I had went to sleep was being awakened by somebody shaking Fred while we were laying in the bed, saying, "Chairman, Chairman, wake up, the pigs are vamping, the pigs are vamping." This person that was in the room with me kept shouting out, "We have a pregnant sister in here, stop shooting." Eventually the shooting stopped and they said we could come out. I remember crossing over Fred and telling myself over and over, be real careful, don't stumble, they'll try to shoot you. Just be real calm, watch how you walk. Keep your hands up, don't reach for anything, don't even try to close your robe. When I was in the kitchen, I heard a voice, an unfamiliar voice, say, "He's barely alive and he'll barely make it." Then the shooting started back again. Then I heard the same unfamiliar voice say, "He's good and dead now." And I knew in my mind I assumed they were talking about Fred. And I knew when I left out of there, I couldn't look towards the room.
She don't pop the Adderall. Now she say she miss me. She gon' pull her, eat it all. Only when she tips.
Party leaders Mark Clark and Fred Hampton were killed in the raid. 4 of the 7 surviving occupants of the apartment were wounded. All were charged with assault and attempted murder.
When they locked me out at the police station, I kept begging him for a call, to make one call. I called, I think, the office, the Black Panther office, and I spoke to Bobby Rush. And he told me that Fred was dead. Fred had been killed.
I remember walking out of the office and looking through a little clearing over on the next block, which was right in front of the Monroe Street address, and seeing a lot of police cars over there. And at that time, Bobby Rush came to the office. He had just come from over there, or maybe the coroner's office. In any case, we walked back over there, and we both were speechless. We just walked through the house and saw what had taken place and where he died, and it was shocking. And then I was, I just began to realize that the information that I supplied leading up to that moment had facilitated that raid. I knew that indirectly I had contributed, and I felt it, and I felt bad about it. And then I got mad. I had, and then I had to conceal those feelings, which made it worse. I couldn't say anything. I just had to continue to play the role.
FBI headquarters authorized payment of a $300 bonus to informant William O'Neill for, quote, uniquely valuable services which he rendered over the past several months, unquote.
The young lady said she's afraid of violence. And isn't it sad that we who have been the victims of so much violence, now whites fear violence from us? We do not have a history of killing white people. White people have a history of killing us. See? And what you fear, and it's a deep guilt thing, that white folks suffer. You are afraid that if we ever come to power, we will do to you and your fathers what you and your people have done to us. And I think you are judging us by the state of your own mind.
It was Chinese immigrants and Black Americans who were considered the two groups who could not be assimilated. And so before the Chinese Exclusion Act and then after the act, often you would see Black and Chinese people being written out of their rights in the law. And in fact, the one group who didn't achieve citizenship under the 14th Amendment were Asian Americans, and they would have to sue again. But then a very early school desegregation case in Mississippi was a Chinese family suing not to have to put their kids in the Black school. They weren't suing to end segregation, they were suing to become today's white. So us not learning these histories, we do have these suspicions of each other.
It's bad that both parties involved, because like I said, I do have a relationship with the owner that I'm also, feeling for my people, my Black and brown people.
Somebody that she's social media influencer. Put me in touch with. We can send her this clip. I don't give a doggone who she is. Shut the hell up! That's what you can do. Send her this clip and tell us, shut up! The hell is you? Feel bad for both parties involved, and you got a relationship with both of them. This is the reason why he got murdered in the first place. Because y'all's energy is one that allows us to get killed. And you will say that the Lord told you to forgive your enemy and turn the other cheek. We gotta live with this. I feel bad for both parties involved. We don't stress out ourselves, distract ourselves, misuse our energy, trying to understand why you don't like us. That's dumb. It's not that there's something wrong with them. Black folks, after thousands of years, and most intensely the past 500 years, if you still asking dumb questions, it ain't them, it's you. Something wrong with you, family. People that prove that they're impossible to get along with. What are you doing? Still sitting up there acting out. Can we all get what? I'm not sitting here trying to understand no enemies no more. So the fact that Black folks are still sitting up here trying to treat the oppressor like they regular and normal is not what's wrong with them. The question is what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? Black family that's from the diaspora that comes to the United States, this is another reason we tell you, please, don't come here wagging your finger telling us how to be good Black people. We're telling you, we know this piece better than anybody. We stayed on our land to fight it. to fight it. And we're trying to show you that you didn't even have to see them face to face. They've been shooting y'all through the door. And it's been us, foundational Black Americans, that's been bringing the most attention to this situation. As we should. I'm just, again, letting you all know this ain't the time for you to wag your finger in our face and tell us how to be good Black folks. You can't teach us nothing about this devil. We're uncheckable. This is not for us to beat up on y'all. I'm just trying to let you all know when we tell you we know this devil, don't question us about it. You just make sure you on the right side and that you're not being used by an open enemy. That's all I'm saying. So Rappaport came out and got mad and tried to include Black Americans in this Israeli war against the Gaza. We ain't got nothing to do with that. But Michael Rappaport came out with another one of his sick, twisted, demented rants, cussing like crazy and talking about foundational Black Americans and white folks like him, Amy Schumer, and a whole bunch of other unremarkable, high-profile whites come out telling Black folks, pissed off at us, telling us that basically we need to get involved in this to defend the Israelis. Ninja, please. We know an oppressor and a terrorist and a killer when we see one.
Zionism is a political philosophy which has brought about the state of Israel, the so-called state of Israel. This political philosophy has nothing to do with religion. On the contrary, it seeks to confuse others and let them think that Zionism and Judaism is one and the same. I am a conscious African. I know properly my history. I know that Africa gave Judaism to the world. I know that the first Jews in the world were Africans. Not only do I know this, but I inform everyone who has doubts about it to read a book by Sigmund Freud entitled Moses and Monotheism as a beginning. Consequently, I know that Judaism and Zionism are not the same. Zionism had its first organizational expressions in 1897 in Basel, Switzerland, in Europe. Here was a man by the name of Theodor Herzl, H-E-R-Z-L. He was the founder of Zionism. He said that he was going to find the state that God promised the Jews. Listen to this very carefully. This man, Herzl, was an atheist. He believed that there was no God. He said God did not exist.
With that being said, let's just get into this video. Let me roll.
That's the dumbest and ignorant thing I've ever heard in my life. Well, I understand she mean Black American, not African American. You want to divide us. Why do you want to divide us? We will never be divided. And why are you hiding your face? Show me your profile picture, please. Put your picture there. Let me tell you which tribe you came from. You are hiding behind the phone, making ignorant comments. African Americans are our brothers and sisters. Every Black person with a DNA like mine, every Black person in this world with ancestors same as mine, we are family. Like it, hate it, we are one people. You want to divide us, it's impossible. We are all gonna unite. Everybody who agrees with me, please let your voice be heard. We will never be torn apart again. United, we will be strong. Enough is enough. If you don't want to be one of us, goodbye. Those who want to be together, we will be together, okay? All African leaders, we need to start backing our brothers and sisters in America up. When anything happens to anyone in America, African leaders, you should be angry. You should open your mouth to say something. You should use your power to say something. If they are going to torture our brothers and sisters back in America, we should stop giving them our resources. We should fight for justice for them. We should back them up. We should let them know that we are no longer wanting to be divided. We no longer want to be separated. We have decided to come together as one, and that's how it's gonna be.
And sure enough, I ain't white because I am an immigrant, an alien, a foreigner. See, I speak the same words, comprehend the same phrases, but just because my tongue rolls in a different way, that don't mean I'm dumb. And see, yes, comprehend the English because I probably speak more English, better English than you. I mean, if you cannot say my name right, moi, la, ho, then you have no right to tell me to say water if I know it as water. What is the meaning of this conversation? To drink water or to say water? So, honey child, please, if you have not walked in my shoes, you have no say in my world. And don't you dare command me to walk in your shoes, because I love the smell of my feet, the feel of my shoes, and the history of my life.
And he threw a fist in the air. Say this. They tell her, don't do this, Winnie. Don't you go there where they have the hunger strike with the unions and the mines and those who are striking to free all of the political prisoners. Next thing you knew, Winnie is right there with her combat boots on and a military fatigues on. Not Nelson, Winnie. Winnie was the one had them putting them tires around the Uncle Tom's necks and setting them on fire. Killed them Uncle Toms. And the ANC repudiated her. And Nelson Mandela had some cool things to say about her when he was in prison. She's a revolutionary. I don't care if it's a woman or a man, I just want to be free. I'll follow a black man, I'll follow a black woman. I just want to be free.
When the New Deal was passed, black people were explicitly not allowed to have those loans. When the Homestead Act allowed white people to get an enormous wealth of land and be able to farm it, black people did not have access to that. When slaves were freed, when Social Security came, black people, when the GI Bill, black people were not. So when you say to me, I don't get how this exists, I'm just having trouble figuring out, like, I mean, you're a bright guy, like, what are you talking about?
Mr. Moderator, Reverend Claud, brothers and sisters, and friends, and I see some enemies.
I don't call that violence. I don't in any way encourage black people to go out and initiate acts of aggression indiscriminately against whites. But I do believe that the black man in the United States and any human being, anywhere, is well within his right to do whatever is necessary, by any means necessary, to protect his life and property, especially in a country where the federal government itself has proven that it is either unable or unwilling to protect the lives and property of those human beings.
If we're going to talk about police brutality, it's because police brutality exists. Why does it exist? Because our people in this particular society live in a police state. A black man in America lives in a police state. He doesn't live in any democracy. He lives in a police state. That's what it is. That's what Harlem is. And I recall this book that just came out, written by Silberman, called Crisis in Black and White. I advise everybody here, read it. Crisis in Black and White by Charles Silberman. In my opinion, it's a good analysis of the problems that confront black people as well as white people in this country, and it goes right down to the root cause that has produced all these conditions, and it doesn't apologize for anybody. It shows where the fault lies on both sides. And this book stems from an article that the author originally wrote in Fortune magazine, the March issue, 1962, at which time he stated that if something isn't done to relieve the black people in these Negro communities across the country of the injustices and prostrations that they are confronted with every day, that this country would see a time when the Negro communities from coast to coast would become like the Casbah. The Casbah, I fortunately was able to visit myself 2 weeks ago. I visited the one in Casablanca, and I visited the one in Algiers with some of the brothers, blood brothers. They took me all down into it and showed me the suffering, showed me the conditions that they had to live under while they were being occupied by the French, who were supposedly their friends, supposedly their protectors, supposedly their benefactors. They showed me the conditions that they lived under while they were colonized by these people from Europe. And they also showed me what they had to do to get those people off their back. The first thing they had to realize that all of them were brothers. Oppression made them brothers. Exploitation made them brothers. Degradation made them brothers. Discrimination made them brothers. Segregation made them brothers. Humiliation made them brothers. And once all of them realized that they were blood brothers, they also realized what they had to do to get that man off their back. They lived in a police state. Algeria was a police state. Any occupied territory is a police state. And this is what Harlem is. Harlem is a police state. It's the police in Harlem, their presence is like occupation forces, like an occupying army. They're not in Harlem to protect us. They're not in Harlem to look out for our welfare. They're in Harlem to protect the interests of the businessmen who don't even live there. They're the same conditions that prevailed in Algeria, that forced the people, the noble people of Algeria, to resort eventually to the terrorist-type tactics that were necessary to get the monkey off their back. Those same conditions prevail today in America, in every Negro community. And I would be, other than a man, to stand up here and tell you that the Afro-Americans, the black people who live in these communities under these conditions are ready and willing to continue to sit around nonviolently and patiently and peacefully, looking for some goodwill to change the conditions that exist. No, and you are out of your mind if you think that our people, it's easy for you to live in another neighborhood and be sympathetic to the cause, and then come in with some nonviolent tactics and think that we too will think that that's sufficient. But if you had to live under those conditions and suffer what our people suffer, you would have gotten rid of that nonviolence a long time ago. The next thing you'll see here in America, and please don't blame it on me when you see it, you will see the same things that have taken place among other people on this earth whose condition was parallel to that of the 22 million Afro-Americans in this country. The people of China grew tired of their oppressors, and the people rose up against their oppressors. They didn't rise up nonviolently. It was easy to talk about the odds were against them, but 11 of them started out. And today those 11 control 800 million. They would have been told back then that the odds were against them. As the oppressor always points out to the oppressed, the odds are against you. When Castro was up in the mountains of Cuba, they told him the odds were against him. Today he's sitting in Havana, and all the power that this country has can't remove it. They told the Algerians the same thing. What do you have to fight with? Today they have to bow down to Bendella. He came out of the jail that they put him in, and today they have to negotiate with him, because he knew that the one thing he had on his side was truth and time. Time is on the side of the oppressed today. It's against the oppressed. And truth is on the side of the oppressed today. It's against the oppressed. You don't need anything else. So I would just like to say this in my conclusion. You'll see it. You'll see terrorism that will terrify you. And if you don't think you'll see it, you are trying to blind yourself to the historic development of everything that's taking place on this earth today.
The economic philosophy of black nationalism only means that we have to become involved in a program of re-education to educate our people into the importance of knowing that when you spend your dollar out of the community in which you live, the community in which you spend your money becomes richer and richer. The community out of which you take your money becomes poorer and poorer. And because these Negroes who have been misled and misguided are breaking their necks to take their money and spend it with the man is becoming richer and richer, and you're becoming poorer and poorer. And then what happens? The community in which you live becomes a slum. It becomes a ghetto. The conditions become run down. And then you have the audacity to complain about poor housing in a rundown community. Why, you run it down yourself when you take your dollar out. And you and I are in a double trap, because not only do we lose by taking our money someplace else and spending it, when we try and spend it in our own community, we're trapped because we haven't had sense enough to set up stores and control the businesses of our community. The man who's controlling the stores in our community is a man who doesn't look like we do. He's a man who doesn't even live in the community. So you and I, even when we try and spend our money in the block where we live or the area where we live, we're spending it with a man who, when the sun goes down, takes that basket full of money in another part of the town. So we're trapped, double trapped, triple trapped. Anywhere we go, we find that we're trapped. And every kind of solution that someone comes up with is just another trap. But the political and economic philosophy of black nationalism, the economic philosophy of black nationalism shows our people the importance of setting up these little stores and developing them and expanding them into larger operations. Woolworth didn't start out big like they are today. They started out with a dime store and expanded and expanded and expanded until today they're all over the country and all over the world, and they're getting some of everybody's money. Now this, what you and I in General Motors, the same way, didn't start out like it is. It started out just a little rat race type operation, and it expanded and expanded until today is where it is right now. And you and I have to make a start, and the best place to start is right in the community where we live. So our people not only have to be re-educated to the importance of supporting black business, but the black man himself has to be made aware of the importance of going into business. And once you and I go into business, we own and operate at least the businesses in our community. What we will be doing is developing a situation wherein we will actually be able to create employment for the people in the community. And once you can create some employment in the community where you live, it will eliminate the necessity of you and me having to act ignorantly and disgracefully, boycotting and picketing some cracker someplace else, trying to beg him for a job. Anytime you have to rely upon your enemy for a job, you're in bad shape. And he is your enemy. Anytime, you wouldn't be in this country if some enemy hadn't kidnapped you and brought you here. On the other hand, some of you think you came here on the Mayflower. So as you can see, brothers and sisters, today, this afternoon, it's not our intention to discuss religion. We're going to forget religion. If we bring up religion, we'll be in an argument. And the best way to keep away from arguments and differences, as I said earlier, put your religion at home, in the closet. Keep it between you and your God. Because if it hasn't done anything more for you than it has, you need to forget it anyway. Whether you are a Christian or a Muslim or a nationalist, we all have the same problem. They don't hang you because you're a Baptist, they hang you because you're black. They don't attack me because I'm a Muslim, they attack me because I'm black. They attack all of us for the same reason. All of us catch hell from the same enemy. We're all in the same bag, in the same boat. We suffer political oppression, economic exploitation, and social degradation. All of them from the same enemy. The government has failed us. You can't deny that. Anytime you live in the 20th century, 1964, and you walking around here singing, "We shall overcome," the government has failed. This is part of what's wrong with you. You do too much singing. Today it's time to stop singing and start swinging. You can't sing up on freedom, but you can swing up on some freedom. Cassius Clay can sing, but singing didn't help him to become the heavyweight champion of the world. Swinging helped him become. So this government has failed us. The government itself has failed us. And the white liberals who have been posing as our friends have failed us. And once we see that all these other sources to which we've turned have failed, we stop turning to them and turn to ourselves. We need a self-help program, a do-it-yourself philosophy, a do-it-right-now philosophy, it's already too late philosophy. This is what you and I need to get with. And the only way we're going to solve our problem is with a self-help program. Before we can get a self-help program started, we have to have a self-help philosophy. Black nationalism is a self-help philosophy. What's so good about it, you can stay right in the church where you are and still take black nationalism as your philosophy. You can stay in any kind of civic organization that you belong to and still take black nationalism as your philosophy. You can be an atheist and still take black nationalism as your philosophy. This is a philosophy that eliminates the necessity for division and argument. Because if you're black, you should be thinking black. And if you're black and you're not thinking black at this late date, well, I'm sorry for you. Once you change your philosophy, you change your thought pattern. Once you change your thought pattern, you change your attitude. Once you change your attitude, it changes your behavior pattern. And then you go on into some action. As long as you got a sit-down philosophy, you'll have a sit-down thought pattern. And as long as you think that old sit-down thought, you'll be in some kind of sit-down action. They'll have you sitting in everywhere. It's not so good to refer to what you're going to do as a sit-in. That right there castrates you. Right there it brings you down. What goes with it? Think of the image of someone sitting. An old woman can sit. An old man can sit. A chump can sit. A coward can sit. Anything can sit. Well, you and I have been sitting long enough, and it's time today for us to start doing some standing and some fighting to back that up. When we look at other parts of this earth upon which we live, we find that black, brown, red, and yellow people in Africa and Asia are getting their independence. They're not getting it by singing, "We shall overcome." No, they're getting it through nationalism. It is nationalism that brought about the independence of the people in Asia. Every nation in Asia gained its independence through the philosophy of nationalism. Every nation on the African continent that has gotten its independence brought it about through the philosophy of nationalism. And it will take black nationalism to bring about the freedom of 22 million Afro-Americans here in this country where we have suffered colonialism for the past 400 years. America is just as much a colonial power as England ever was. America is just as much a colonial power as France ever was. In fact, America is more so a colonial power than they, because she's a hypocritical colonial power behind it. What do you call second-class citizenship? Why, that's colonization. Second-class citizenship is nothing but 20th century slavery. How are you going to tell me you're a second-class citizen? They don't have second-class citizenship in any other government on this earth. They just have slaves and people who are free. Well, this country is a hypocrite. They try and make you think they set you free by calling you a second-class citizen. No, you're nothing but a 20th century slave. Just as it took nationalism to remove colonialism from Asia and Africa, it'll take black nationalism today to remove colonialism from the backs and the minds of 22 million Afro-Americans here in this country. And 1964 looks like it might be the year of the ballot or the bullet. Why does it look like it might be the year of the ballot or the bullet? Because Negroes have listened to the trickery and the lies and the false promises of the white man now for too long. And they're fed up. They've become disenchanted. They've become disillusioned. They've become dissatisfied. And all of this has built up frustrations in the black community that makes the black community throughout America today more explosive than all of the atomic bombs the Russians can ever invent. Whenever you got a racial powder keg sitting in your lap, you're in more trouble than if you had an atomic powder keg sitting in your lap. When a racial powder keg goes off, it doesn't care who it knocks out the way. Understand this, it's dangerous. And in 1964, this seems to be the year. Because what can the white man use now to fool us? After he put down that march on Washington, and you see all through that now, he tricked you, had you marching down to Washington. Yes, had you marching back and forth between the feet of a dead man named Lincoln and another dead man named George Washington, singing "We Shall Overcome." He made a chump out of him. He made a fool out of him. He made you think you were going somewhere, and you end up going nowhere but between Lincoln and Washington. So today our people are disillusioned. They've become disenchanted. They've become dissatisfied. And in their frustrations, they want action. You'll see this young black man, this new generation, asking for the ballot or the vote. That old Uncle Tom action is outdated. The young generation don't want to hear anything about the odds are against us. What do we care about odds? When this country here was first being founded, there were 13 colonies. The whites were colonized. They were fed up with this taxation without representation. So some of them stood up and said, liberty or death. So I went to a white school over here in Mason, Michigan. The white man made the mistake of letting me read his history books. He made the mistake of teaching me that Patrick Henry was a patriot and George Washington wasn't nothing nonviolent about old Pat or George Washington. Liberty or death was what brought about the freedom of whites in this country from the English. They didn't care about the arts. Why, they faced the wrath of the entire British Empire. And in those days, they used to say that the British Empire was so vast and so powerful when the sun would never set on it. This is how big it was. Yet these 13 little scrawny states, tired of taxation without representation, tired of being exploited and oppressed and degraded, told that big British Empire, liberty or death. And here you have 22 million Afro-American black people today catching more hell than Patrick Henry ever saw. And I'm here to tell you, in case you don't know it, that you got a new generation of black people in this country who don't care anything whatsoever about odds. They don't want to hear you old Uncle Tom handkerchief head talking about the odds. No. This is a new generation. If they're going to draft these young black men and send them over to Korea or South Vietnam to face 800 million Chinese,
you're not afraid of those odds, you shouldn't be afraid of these odds. Why is America, why does this loom to be such an explosive political year? Because this is the year of politics. This is the year when all of the white politicians are going to come into the Negro community. You never see them until election time. You can't blame them until election time. They're going to come in with false promises. And as they make these false promises, they're going to feed our frustrations. And this will only serve to make matters worse. I'm no politician. I'm not even a student of politics. I'm not a Republican, nor a Democrat, nor an American, and got sense enough to know it. I'm one of the 22 million black victims of the Democrats. One of the 22 million black victims of the Republicans, and one of the 22 million black victims of Americanism. And when I speak, I don't speak as a Democrat or a Republican. I speak as a victim of America's so-called democracy. You and I have never seen democracy. All we've seen is hypocrisy. When we open our eyes today and look around America, we see America not through the eyes of someone who has enjoyed the fruits of Americanism. We see America through the eyes of someone who has been the victim of Americanism. We don't see any American dream. We've experienced only the American nightmare. We haven't benefited from America's democracy. We've only suffered from America's hypocrisy. And the generation that's coming up now can see it and are not afraid to say it. If you go to jail, so what? If you're black, you were born in jail. If you black, you were born in jail. In the North as well as the South. Stop talking about the South. Long as you're south of the Canadian border, you're south. Don't call Governor Wallace a Dixie governor. Romney is a Dixie governor. 22 million black victims of Americanism are waking up, and they're gaining a new political consciousness, becoming politically mature. And as they develop this political maturity, they're able to see the recent trends in these political elections. They see that the whites are so evenly divided that every time they vote, the race is so close, they have to go back and count the votes all over again. And which means that any block, any minority that has a block of votes that stick together is in a strategic position. Either way you go, that's who gets it. You're in a position to determine who go to the White House and who stay in the doghouse. You're the one who has that power. You can keep Johnson in Washington, D.C., or you can send him back to his Texas cotton patch. You're the one who sent Kennedy to Washington. You're the one who put the present Democratic administration in Washington, D.C. The whites were evenly divided. It was the fact that you threw 80% of your votes behind the Democrats that put the Democrats in the White House. When you see this, you can see that the Negro vote is the key factor. And despite the fact that you are in a position to be the determining factor, what do you get out of it? The Democrats have been in Washington, D.C. only because of the Negro vote. They've been down there 4 years. And all other legislation they wanted to bring up, they brought it up and got it out of the way, and now they bring up you. And now they bring up you. You put them first and they put you last. Because you're a chump. A political chump.
In Washington, D.C., in the House of Representatives, there are 257 who are Democrats. Only 177 are Republicans. In the Senate, there are 67 Democrats. Only 33 are Republicans. The party that you back controls 2/3 of the House of Representatives and the Senate, and still they can't keep their promise to you, because you're a chump. Anytime you throw your weight behind a political party that controls 2/3 of the government, and that party can't keep the promise that it made to you during election time, and you're dumb enough to walk around continuing to identify yourself with that party, you're not only a chump, but you're a traitor to your race. And what kind of alibi do they come up with? They try and pass the buck to the Dixiecrats. Now, back during the days when you were blind, deaf, and dumb, ignorant, politically immature, naturally you went along with that. But today, as your eyes come open and you develop political maturity, you're able to see and think for yourself. And you can see that a Dixiecrat is nothing but a Democrat in disguise. You look at the structure of the government that controls this country. It's controlled by 16 senatorial committees and 20 congressional committees. Of the 16 senatorial committees that run the government, 10 of them are in the hands of Southern segregationists. Of the 20 congressional committees that run the government, 12 of them are in the hands of Southern segregationists. And they're going to tell you and me that the South lost the war. Today are in the hands of a government of segregationists, racists, white supremacists, who belong to the Democratic Party but disguise themselves as Dixiecrats. A Dixiecrat is nothing but a Democrat. Whoever runs the Democrats is also the father of the Dixiecrats, and the father of all of them is sitting in the White House. I say it again. You got a president who's nothing but a Southern segregationist. From the state of Texas. They'll lynch you in Texas as quick as they'll lynch you in Mississippi. Only in Texas, they lynch you with a Texas accent. In Mississippi, they lynch you with a Mississippi accent. And the first thing the cracker does when he comes in power, he takes all the Negro leaders and invites them for coffee to show that he's all right. And those Uncle Toms can't pass up the coffee. They come away from the coffee table telling you and me that this man is all right. Because he's from the South. And since he's from the South, he can deal with the South. And look at the logic that they're using. What about Eastland? He's from the South. Make him the president. If Johnson is a good man because he's from Texas, and being from Texas will enable, if Johnson is a good man because he's from Texas, and being from Texas will enable him to deal with the South, Eastland can deal with the South better than Johnson. Oh, I say, you've been misled. You've been had. You've been took. In Washington a couple of weeks ago, while the senators were filibustering, and I noticed in the back of the Senate a huge map. And on this map, it showed the distribution of Negroes in America. And surprisingly, the same senators that were involved in the filibuster were from the states where there were the most Negroes. Why were they filibustering the civil rights legislation? Because the civil rights legislation is supposed to guarantee voting rights to Negroes in those states. And those senators from those states know that if the Negroes in those states can vote, those senators are down the drain. The representatives of those states go down the drain. And in the Constitution of this country, it has a stipulation wherein whenever the rights, the voting rights of people in a certain district are violated, then the representative who's from that particular district, according to the Constitution, is supposed to be expelled from the Congress. Now, if this particular aspect of the Constitution was enforced, why, you wouldn't have a cracker in Washington, D.C. But what would happen when you expel the Dixiecrat? You're expelling the Democrat. When you destroy the power of the Dixiecrat, you're destroying the power of the Democratic Party. So how in the world can the Democratic Party in the South actually side with you in sincerity when all of its power is based in the South? These Northern Democrats are in cahoots with the Southern Democrats. They're playing a giant con game, a political con game. You know how it goes. One of them comes to you and make believe he's for you. And he's in cahoots with the other one that's not for you. Why? Because neither one of them is for you. But they got to make you go with one of them or the other. So this is a con game. And this is what they've been doing with you and me all these years. First thing Johnson got off the plane, when he became president, he asked, "Where's Vicki?" You know who Dickie is? Dickie is old Southern cracker Richard Russell. Look here. Yes. Lyndon B. Johnson's best friend is the one who is the head, who's heading the forces that are filibustering civil rights legislation. You tell me, how in the hell is he going to be Johnson's best friend? Johnson be his friend and your friend too? No, that man is too tricky, especially if his friend is still old Dickie. Whenever the Negroes keep the Democrats in power, they're keeping the Dixiecrats in power. This is true. A vote for a Democrat is nothing but a vote for a Dixiecrat. I know you don't like me saying that, but the kind of person who come here to say what you like. I'm going to tell you the truth whether you like it or not. Up here in the North, you have the same thing. The Democratic Party don't do it. They don't do it that way. They got a thing that they call gerrymandering. They maneuver you out of power. Even though you can vote, they fix it so you're voting for nobody. They got you going and coming. In the South, they're outright political wolves. In the North, they're political foxes. A fox and a wolf are both canine. Both belong to the dog family. Now, you take your choice. You're going to choose a northern dog or a southern dog. Because either dog you choose, I guarantee you, you'll still be in the doghouse. This is why I say it's the ballot or the bullet. It's liberty or it's death. It's freedom for everybody or freedom for nobody. America today finds herself in a unique situation. Historically, revolutions are bloody. Oh, yes, they are. They have never had a bloodless revolution or a nonviolent revolution. That don't happen even in Hollywood. You don't have a revolution in which you love your enemy. And you don't have a revolution in which you are begging the system of exploitation to integrate you into it. Revolutions overturn systems. Revolutions destroy systems. A revolution is bloody. But America is in a unique position. She's the only country in history in a position actually to become involved in a bloodless revolution. The Russian Revolution was bloody. Chinese Revolution was bloody. French Revolution was bloody. Cuban Revolution was bloody. And there was nothing more bloody than the American Revolution. But today, this country can become involved in a revolution that won't take bloodshed. All she's got to do is give the black man in this country everything he's doing. Everything. I hope that the white man can see this, because if you don't see it, you're finished. If you don't see it, you're going to become involved in some action in which you don't have a chance. We don't care anything about your atomic bomb. It's useless, because other countries have atomic bombs. When 2 or 3 different countries have atomic bombs, nobody can use it. So it means that the white man today is without a weapon. If you want some action, you got to come on down to earth. And there's more black people on earth than there are white people. I only got a couple more minutes. The white man can never win another war on the ground. His days of war victory, his days of background victory are over. Can I prove it? Yes. Take all the action that's going on this earth right now that he's involved in. Tell me where he's winning. Nowhere. Why, some rice farmers, some rice eaters ran him out of Cornell. Yes, they ran him out of Cornell. Rice eaters with nothing but gym shoes and a rifle and a bowl of rice. Took him and his tanks and his napalm and all that other action he's supposed to have and ran him across the Yalu. Why? Because the day that he can win on the ground is past. Up in French Indochina, those little peasants, rice growers, took on the might of the French army and ran all the Frenchmen. You remember Dien Bien Phu? The same thing happened in Algeria, in Africa. They didn't have anything but a rifle. The French had all these highly mechanized instruments of warfare, but they put some guerrilla action on. And a white man can't fight a guerrilla warfare. Guerrilla action takes heart, takes nerve, and he doesn't have that. He's brave when he's got tanks. He's brave when he's got planes. He's brave when he's got bombs. He's brave when he got a whole lot of company along with him. But you take that little man from Africa and Asia, turn him loose in the woods with a blade. That's all he needs. All he needs is a blade. And when the sun comes down, goes down, and it stops, it's even Steven. It's the ballot or the bullet. Today our people can see that we're faced with a government conspiracy. This government has failed us. The senators who are filibustering concerning your and my rights, that's the government. Don't say it's Southern senators, this is the government. This is the government filibuster. It's not a segregationist filibuster. It's the government filibuster. Any kind of activity that takes place on the floor of the Congress or the Senate, that's the government. Any kind of dilly-dallying, that's the government. Any kind of pussyfooting, that's the government. Any kind of act that's designed to delay or deprive you and me right now of getting full rights, that's the government that's responsible. And anytime you find the government involved in a conspiracy to violate the citizenship or the civil rights of a people, then you are wasting your time going to that government expecting redress. Instead, you have to take that government to the World Court and accuse it of genocide and all of the other crimes that it is guilty of today. So those of us whose political and economic and social philosophy is black nationalism have become involved in the civil rights struggle. We have injected ourselves into the civil rights struggle, and we intend to expand it from the level of civil rights to the level of human rights. As long as you fight it on the level of civil rights, you're under Uncle Sam's jurisdiction. You're going to his court expecting him to correct the problem. He created the problem. He's the criminal. You don't take your case to the criminal, you take your criminal to court. When the government of South Africa began to trample upon the human rights of the people of South Africa, they were taken to the UN. When the government of Portugal began to trample upon the rights of our brothers and sisters in Angola, it was taken before the UN. Why, even the white man took the Hungarian question to the UN, and just this week, Chief Justice Goldberg was crying over 3 million Jews in Russia about their human rights, charging Russia with violating the UN Charter because of its mistreatment of the human rights of Jews in Russia. Now you tell me, how can the plight of everybody on this earth reach the halls of the United Nations when you have 22 million Afro-Americans whose churches are being bombed, whose little girls are being murdered, whose leaders are being shot down in broad daylight? Now you tell me why the leaders of this struggle have never taken it before the United Nations. So our next move is to take the entire civil rights struggle into the United Nations. And let the world see that Uncle Sam is guilty of violating the human rights of 22 million Africans. And Bill has the audacity or the nerve to stand up and represent himself as the leader of the free world. Not only is he a crook, he's a hypocrite. Here he is standing up in front of other people, Uncle Sam, with the blood of your and my mothers and fathers on his hands, with the blood dripping down his jaws like a bloody-jawed wolf, and still got the nerve to point his finger at other countries. You can't even get civil rights legislation. And this man has got the nerve to stand up and talk about South Africa, or talk about Nazi Germany, or talk about Portugal. Why, no more days like those. So I say in my conclusion, the only way we're going to solve it, we got to unite in unity and harmony. And black nationalism is the key. How are we going to overcome the tendency to be at each other's throats that always exists in our neighborhood? And the reason this tendency exists, the strategy of the white man has always been divide and conquer. He keeps us divided in order to conquer us. He tells you, I'm for separation and you for integration, and keep us fighting with each other. No, I'm not for separation and you're not for integration. What you and I are for is freedom. Only you think that integration will get you freedom. I think separation will get me freedom. We both got the same objective. We just got different ways of getting at it. So I studied this man, Billy Graham, who preaches white nationalism. That's what he preaches. I say that's what he preaches. The whole church structure in this country is white nationalism. You go inside a white church, that's what they're preaching, white nationalism. They got Jesus white, Mary white, God white, everybody white, that's white nationalism. So what he does, the way he circumvents the the jealousy and envy that he ordinarily would incur among the heads of the church. Whenever you go into an area where the church already is, you're going to run into trouble. Because they got that thing, what you call it, syndicated. So they got a syndicate, just like the racketeers have. I'm going to say what's on my mind, because the preachers already proved to you that they got a syndicate. And when you're out in the rackets, whenever you're getting in another man's territory, you know, they gang up on you. And that's the same way with you. You run into the same thing. So how Billy Graham gets around that, instead of going into somebody else's territory like he's going to start a new church, he doesn't try and start a church. He just goes in preaching Christ. And he says, everybody who believes in him, you go wherever you find him. So this helps all the churches, and so since it helps all the churches, they don't fight him. Well, we're going to do the same thing, only our gospel is black nationalism. His gospel is white nationalism, our gospel is black nationalism. And the gospel of black nationalism, as I told you, means you should control the politics of your community, the economy of your community, and all of the society in which you live should be under your control. And once you feel that this philosophy will solve your problem, go join any church where that's preached. Don't join a church where white nationalism is preached. Now you can go to a Negro church and dispose the white nationalism. Because when you walk in a Negro church and a white Mary and some white angels, that Negro church is preaching white nationalism. But when you go to a church and you see the pastor of that church with a philosophy and a program that's designed to bring black people together and elevate black people, join that church. Join that church. If you see where the NAACP is preaching and practicing that which is designed to make black nationalism materialize, join NAACP. Join any kind of organization, civic, religious, fraternal, political, or otherwise, that's based on lifting the black man up and making him master of his own community. It'll be the ballot, or it'll be the vote. It'll be liberty, or it'll be death. And if you're not ready to pay that price, don't use the word freedom in your vocabulary. One more thing. I was on a program in Illinois recently with Senator Paul Douglas, so-called liberal, so-called Democrat, so-called white man. At which time he told me that our African brothers were not interested in us in Africa. He says the Africans aren't interested in the American Negro. I knew he was lying. But during the next 2 or 3 weeks, it's my intention and plan to make a tour of our African homeland. And I hope that when I come back, I'll be able to come back and let you know how our African brothers and sisters feel toward us. And I know before I go there that they love us. We're one. We're the same. The same man who has colonized them all these years colonized you and me too. All these years. And all we have to do now is wake up and work in unity and harmony, and the battle will be over.
What's going to drive us into this underclass structure? First of all, are the legacies of slavery and Jim Crowism. We are still bearing the burdens and the scars. They were never corrected. That's one of the failings of our leadership in this country. They had the nerve, the audacity to let black folks suffer for 460 years. And at the end of the civil rights movement, rather than going back and saying, let's find out what has happened to black folk for 460 years. Have they been psychologically, emotionally, politically, educationally damaged? Nobody spent 1 minute of time trying to figure out what had happened to black folk over all that period of time. So in the course of the civil rights movement, at the end of it, they say, well, let's pretend that nothing has happened to them, that they were not injured, they were not hurt. And now let's go seek integration and pretend that we're all equal.
Dedicated to all the teachers that told me I never amount to nothing.
Now that was grossly unfair, because by that point in time, in about the 1966 period, whites had become economic giants in America. They owned and controlled everything at that point in time. Black folk didn't own anything. Whites controlled almost 100% of all the wealth, the income, the privileges, the businesses, the resources, and all levels of government. Blacks had nothing. Blacks were one-foot midgets. And they allowed us then to use integration to walk from our communities, from our ghettos over in their communities, totally disarmed, not understanding anything, blind, naked, and then saying that you can go and compete. Compete with what? And that's what's happening in South Africa right now, where you have black folk now who've been totally subjected to the most brutal form of legal and economic slavery around the world for almost 300 years in South Africa, where whites in South Africa control almost 100% of all the gold mines, the diamond mines, the chrome, the bauxite, the magnesium, the land, the businesses, the farms, the animals. And now in South Africa, they've been told that they're free. Now, anybody in his right mind would have said, hold it a second. Now, if there's been a reform in South Africa, since whites have gotten everything and blacks got nothing, you should have seen on the news a massive flux of whites trying to get out of South Africa. If there's going to be any significant real change, wouldn't you agree? Somebody would have been trying to get out of there. The airports would have been jammed. And you all haven't heard of Pete. You know why? Because nothing is changing. Because in South Africa, the dominant, arrogant white society that's been so brutal to black folks still owns and controls 100% of all the gold mines, diamond mines, silver mines, home bauxite. They're telling those South Africans, you can now compete. And that's the problem in black America. We've been told now that we can compete, and I say, well, with what? And by going into our underclass structure, there'll be 7 converging factors going to push us. To get my little summary up. 1, we're going to have an increased amount of conservatism in the country, and I'm going to talk about conservatism in a few minutes. 2, we're going to have a massive, unending influx of immigrants into the country. They're going to push us down. We have been the number 2 population in America now for over 460 years. We're going to get kicked out of being number 2 and going down to number 3. When are we going to go down to number 3? We're going to go down to number 3 in less than 2 years. Now, when I wrote my book about 4 or 5 years ago, Hispanics at that time were 9% of the population. They've now moved in 6 years from 9% up to 11%. Blacks were 12.3% 6 years ago. They're still at 12.3%. Now you got the Hispanics at 11 and blacks at 12.3. According to the Census Bureau 2 weeks ago in Washington, D.C., they anticipate Hispanics passing blacks right on time, as I had predicted. Now, Wall Street Journal, the left-hand column 2 weeks ago, on the left-hand side of the page, I can send it to you if you want, it says that when Hispanics pass black people, at that time, the whole political structure will shift gears. There'll be a power shift in America. That nobody's going to go to black folks to ask them anything anymore because you're no longer the dominant minority population. They're already preparing for this. They're already creating all kinds of major programs around the country where they will go and check with Hispanics about anything they want to know about minorities. Black folk will get their information through the Hispanic Society. Then by the year 2005, the Asians are going to pass black folk. Then you're going to get kicked from being number 3 down to number 4. At that point in time, you're locked in and frozen because everything you need, you will have to pass through those 2 groups. And those 2 groups do not have your interest at heart. They don't understand your problems and don't care about it. If you can't compete, they're going to say that's tough. And so what we're going to try to do today in dealing with that one issue, as well as conservatism and the problems of technology in America that's also going to push us in the underclass, is to teach you how to compete. We got to understand we got these problems, but you got to understand where the problems came from. And I want to give you a real fast education today, because the real clue to liberation is not only education, it's re-education. And that's what we're going to talk about this morning. I'm going to show you how we got into our dilemma and how we must get out of it. Nothing has happened to black folk by accident. Everything that's happened to you has been systematically programmed through what I call social engineering. You are a victim of historical social engineering. Now let's go back and start dealing with some of these issues. And a lot of this would you also find covered in my book, Black Labor, White Wealth, and the other 2 books I got coming out this year. One is Sunday, they gotten tired of beating them. They said, well, we just go ahead and kill them. And so one of the officers picked up a rifle, and hit the oldest black kid in the back of the head with a rifle. The kid was only about 22 years of age. Hit him so hard that it knocked one eye completely out of socket and bulged the other eye and broke the rifle stock. And the poor kid fell on his knees and crawled around and found the broken stock of the rifle, and on his knees held it up and apologized for having a hard head. That is inappropriate behavior. The question should have been, why are you brutalizing me and killing me? What have I done to you? And so that's the kind of inappropriate behavior. It's what we've been systematically programming to displaying as black folk in a very highly competitive society. So what I want you all to start thinking about today and all throughout my speech today is not who you're against, but who you're for. I want you to understand that you're in a very highly competitive situation. You're going to be competing to survive and prosper. And that's what racism is all about. Contrary to what anybody tells you, and I just saw a definition of racism in the Washington Post last week by a noted columnist who's a conservative. And what he was really talking about was prejudice and discrimination. He wasn't talking about racism, but he was mystifying the word. That's why I finally figured out why he's always on the wrong side of an issue relating to black folk. He thinks that a black person can be racist. A black person cannot be a racist. Racism is a power relationship between groups of people. That's all it is. It means where one group of people have control of so much wealth and power and resource that it can deprive, hurt, and injure and exploit another group to benefit itself. Never in the history of this earth have black folk ever controlled that much resources and where they can have gone out of their way to exploit, injure, and do something to whites. So therefore, racism only started in the 16th century when you began to commercialize slavery against blacks. That's when racism started. There was no such thing as racism before that. The other thing, and before I get into my presentation, you got to understand racism also comes from the word race. Race means group. So whenever you hear people talking about now, you cannot prove racism because somebody fired you from a job, they are absolutely right. And the power structure and all the white think tanks in Washington know that. That's why you can no longer prove racism, because racism does not apply to an individual, it applies to a group. And because I discriminate against you, that's individual, that's personal. It's not group-based, and so you can no longer prove group-based discrimination. The second thing about the word race, remember also, which is very important for our discussion today, is the word race means being in competition. See, they didn't pick house, tree, car. They said racism. Race means being where people are competing from here to there. And we are in competition. That's what racism means. Black people must learn how to compete or survive, or not compete and perish. And so this morning we're going to start talking about what we got to do. Now let's go back to when everybody said, where did it start? Let's go back to where it started. It all started in Africa. And as I go through all this, I want you all to keep some points. And I'll stick my finger up in there. Remember those points. Those are the points going to be hurting us today. Those same points I'm going to articulate to you today. Now all this started in Africa. Let's say about 1441. There was a guy called Henry the Navigator who went around the coast of Africa and he found some slaves and traded some slaves off. And he brought them back to Europe. And he took them back to Europe and he gave them to the Pope as gifts. And the Pope and the Catholic Church were so beautifully appreciative of these slaves that he then said, since you've given me these slaves, what I'm going to do now is award you 300 miles of the coastline of West Africa, which is now called the Gold Coast. So Henry the Navigator was given land by the Pope, the Catholic Pope, and the Catholic Pope didn't even own the land. But he gave him all the rights of 300 miles of coastlines of West Africa. Said it belongs to you. That was in 1441. And so Henry the Navigator was a Portuguese. So he began to then try to encourage other Portuguese to go around there and try to find some more slaves. So this is a good thing. We own all that land around there now. By 1487, the Pope then said, so many people began to pick up slaves. He says, what I'm going to do now is put out a public declaration and officially declare slavery to be a legitimate enterprise. And the Catholic Church was the first one to do it. Now, why is this important? Because you see, up until that point in time, slavery was never based on skin color. Slavery was based on three things to be to put you into slavery. One was an indebtedness where you owed somebody something and not paid it off. Two was that you was through religious persecution. Or three, you were a prisoner of a war or conflict and you were now a captive and they were forcing you into labor. Those were the only three reasons you could get into slavery. Until the Catholic Church put out this declaration. And now they added a fourth variable which says color is now a factor.
That means it's money.
Now that's very important because the Catholic Church now had in previous slavery, in earlier parts of the century, let's say immediately after Christ was born, the Catholic Church played a very pivotal role in saying, as a religious institution, we got an obligation to represent those who are enslaved. And the Catholic Church set up a system that they would go through, whether it was a Greek slave or Roman slave, they looked after the rights of the enslaved, protected, saying that even if you're a slave, there are certain things that people cannot do to you. The Catholic Church accepted that responsibility. Now, the Catholic Church now has condoned black enslavement based on skin color. That was totally different. But also, the first thing they did, they abandoned any interest in representing the interests of the enslaved, even though they've done it for everyone else. And all of a sudden, the problems began to develop in Africa. Other religions began to join in. So people say, well, Dr. Anderson, how were they able to enslave us? Because we were doing some things wrong in Africa. As the other religions joined in to start enslaving blacks, so did other nations, so did other ethnic groups. And black folk were totally ill-prepared to deal with it because we had been doing some things wrong in Africa ourselves. See, going back to about 765, the Muslims had been trying to get into Africa for the longest because they'd heard about all the gold and silver and the wealth in Africa. And the Muslims have been going around, the Arabs have been going around Africa trying to conduct holy wars against dark-skinned people to get access to the resources. And starting in 765, not 17, but in 765, the Arabs started enslaving black folk. They enslaved on an average of 1 million blacks every 100 years and shipped them out of Africa. So now if you start counting from 765 up to the present day, that's over 1,300 years. That means over 13 million blacks have been shipped out of Africa just by the Arabs alone. And the Arabs are still shipping blacks out slavery. If you go to Ethiopia and Mauritania, you now find, in Sudan, you still find blacks being sold by Arabs for actually about $475 a piece. So Arabs have been selling blacks now for over 1,300 years. But when we get around the 900, though, 200 years after that, the Arabs are still trying to penetrate the blacks to get the wealth. And blacks have got an international reputation being one of the wealthiest nations on earth, talking about walking on streets of gold. And so from 900 up until about 1400, they live reasonably well because people were afraid to penetrate Africa. Because blacks also had a ferocious reputation for being invincible fighters. They were scared of the jungles and the black warriors. So no one went into Africa to get them, but the Arabs were still trying to get in, get access to the wealth and resources. Now back up to the 14th century again. Now in the 1400s, about the same time as I just told you that the Pope declared that officially that blacks can be enslaved, at the same time Timbuktu was invaded by the Arabs. They finally broke through. They broke through because, see, blacks at that time had three major empires, Ghana, Mali, and Songhai. They were the richest nation on earth, but the black leadership had set themselves up to be invaded by the Arabs and to essentially be pimped. Because the black leadership was extremely naive, going around practicing what I call benign slavery. Every time anybody came into an African nation, like Mali, Songhai, and what they were saying is that, well, I'll do business with you, but you got to buy one of my slaves. And the slaves were their own people. And they were playing games with slavery, saying, well, it's a tribe, he's a different tribe, so I'll enslave him. But the slavery that blacks were practicing was not the same vicious kind of slavery that came later, but the fact that they were playing with it, condoning it, and willing to sell their own black folk out naively. Now the question becomes, why were they doing it? Okay? Why were they doing it? They were doing it trying to impress people with their power, how strong they were, saying that I would do business with you, but let me show you how strong I am. I got 3 or 4 blacks in the back room, and you buy them from me. And then I'll sell you some gold and silver. And what people were impressed with was not really their power. They were impressed with the fact that you had absolutely no interest as a leader in your own people and felt no responsibility to their welfare. And so when that got out, then all those countries, as I said, once the Pope condoned slavery, they began to flow into Africa because they knew the black leadership did not feel the strong togetherness, the willingness to protect their own people, and to look out for them and lead them, and would willingly sacrifice them. So Africa fell wide open. And people poured into Africa after the Pope declared slavery legal in the 1480s. By 1500, between 1500 and 1650, 150 years, they hauled out 5 million blacks just to Central America alone, just right south of here into Mexico and to Central America, Costa Rica. Just to give you an example, after the Pope declared that you could legally go after those blacks, they pulled out 5 million of them and sent them in there. And those blacks, in 150 years, with sticks and stones, not other steam shovels, but with sticks and stones and rocks, dug out over 16,000 tons of silver and 400 tons of gold, just to enrich Spain and Portugal. And this was critically important because at that point in time, Africa was a rich continent, had all kinds of wealth. And Europe was an impoverished nation. Europe was run over with crime, sickness, disease, illness, disorganized. Africa was the glory of the world. But you see how people were playing around, not looking at taking care of the business of their people. At that point in time, all these nations say, aha, we know how to strengthen Europe and rebuild Europe. And that's by displacing the wealth out of Africa and displacing not only the material wealth, but the human wealth of Africa. So they began to pour in and started sucking blacks out of Africa. Not only the black treasures, the gold, the silver, but also the human capital. In some areas, they almost depopulated parts of Africa by shipping blacks out. And over a course of about another 300 years, they shipped out somewhere between 25 and 35 million blacks. And out of all those blacks they shipped out of Africa, over 2/3 of them died en route trying to get here. Matter of fact, from the 1500s to 1800s, 6 out of every 7 people that were shipped came across the Atlantic Ocean were black folks. 6 out of 7 were blacks. And they were depopulating Africa, not only its wealth, its resources, but its human capital. Very important. And as they came and as they shipped them out, everybody began to become enriched. But you still had black leadership that still didn't understand, unwittingly was playing into the hands of people who were much more serious about the games than they were. So I jump up to the year 1619. They brought in 20 blacks into America, formally, even though we'd had another group of blacks in here around in the 1500s. They've been floating around too off the PD River in South Carolina. We had blacks much earlier, the Folsom people. But let me don't even get into that. But by 1619, they brought in 21 blacks into Jamestown, formally. And those blacks came in as indentured servants. They were traded by a British, a German warship for supplies. Those blacks were freed in about the year 1624. But something very important happened right before 1624. In 1621, you had a black guy named Anthony Johnson. Anthony Johnson came to the United States in 1621. Came in from England as a free black. At the same time, you had those other 20 black slaves brought in here in 1619, the first 20 blacks. But this black came in as a free black in 1621. He came in, and then since he was coming in from England, not from Africa, he then declared himself a free black, declared that he wanted head rights. And head rights in those days says anybody coming to the country can get 640 acres free right off the bat. Plus you can get another 500 to 600 acres for every slave that you own. He immediately went and had 13 blacks. He brought in then, we got him 13 black slaves, and he's black. So within a few years, about 15 years, he was one of the richest blacks in the colony. But he was enslaving his own people. Now, going up to 1638, Maryland colony then put out a public edict that laid the cornerstone for racism in this country, saying that now that black folks coming into this country and they began to intermingle with whites and socialize like Johnson and trying to integrate, we got to pass a new law. So the state of Maryland put out a law called Doctrine of Exclusion. The Doctrine of Exclusion says that no black shall be permitted to enjoy the fruits of white society. That was in 1638. Now Johnson was he really built up his land now. He had all kinds of land and a whole bunch of slaves, getting close to about 70, 80 slaves now. And a white guy went over to one of his plantations. And one of the black slaves there, named John Castor, asked him, says, why am I a slave here, this guy? He says, I didn't know that, he said he owns me for life. How does he own me for life? And the white fellow who was a plantation owner also said, look, he doesn't own you for life. You know, didn't you contract for indentured servantship? Indentured servantship normally runs 5 or 7 years. What do you mean he's got you for life? This black guy said, I've been working for this Anthony Johnson, this black slave plantation owner, for almost 27 years. The guy said, well, just run off and leave. Forget about him. You don't have to keep working for him. So the black slave, John Castor, ran off. But guess what happened? Anthony Johnson then went to court. And he sued the white plantation owner who had encouraged the black to run off. Sued him in court, and the court accepted Anthony Johnson's claim against this black slave, saying that he owned that slave for life. Now, what happened there never had ever happened on the history of the earth to black folk and in this country, where all of a sudden a person laid claims against an individual for the rest of his entire naked life. And it was a black man. And once that court decision was made, whites picked it up and said, aha. So by 1665, all the states then started passing enslavement laws. They went back and took the doctrine of exclusion and say, now, the doctrine of exclusion with Maryland says that black folks shall always be excluded and never be permitted to enjoy the fruits of white society. But after listening to the court decision for Anthony Johnson, we got a good thing going now. So they took that same doctrine and expanded it. And now the doctrine says that not only shall black folks be excluded, subordinated, non-compensated, non-competitive managed workforce for the personal comfort and wealth building of white society. That became the enslavement codes, both explicitly and implicitly. And all the states began to enact it then, based on Anthony Johnson's ruling in court that he owns another black person for life. Now the system picks up. We jump now to about 1704. 1704, there's a black kid. There are a whole bunch of slaves coming in from Africa on a slave vessel called the Eagle. The Eagle is heading towards America. There's a young black boy on there, along with some other older slaves. The slaves decide to revolt on the ship. And they took over and knocked the captain down, took over the ship, and took the weapons, and we're in to fight to take over the control of the ship and head it back towards Africa. And as one of the older slaves grabbed a machete, and he said he's going to kill the captain so they can completely have control of the ship. As he swung at the captain, a young black slave jumped up and got in there and protected this captain and took the blows himself, which chopped off one of his arms and protected the captain. And by protecting the captain was able to recover the control of the vessel, put down the insurrection, and they then hung all the blacks who were trying to revolt, except a young black kid who was only 19. When the captain got to America, he gave him to supposedly a benevolent slave owner and rewarded him with recognition, and says that after he's been educated and recovered from his wounds, that he's to be set free. And again, this young boy, he placed more importance on protecting other people than getting his free people out of a dilemma. But he was rewarded and recognized for it. and he personally benefited at the expense of his own people. That was in 1704. 1705, the colonies said, what we need to do now is pass slave codes so we can regulate slaves' behavior, period. Slave codes were passed to tell you exactly how every black person must act in America, what he could not do, and what every white person must do to make sure black folks stayed in line. Then they passed another law at the same time with it, which is still in effect today. It was called the Diversity Act of 1705. You all call it multicultural and cultural diversity. You all understand what I'm saying to you? I want you all to understand history. If you ever want to figure out how to get out of your dilemma, never spend your time trying to work with anything unless you know how it got into place. And then you take it out of place. The multiculturalism and cultural diversity started in 1705. They passed a law at the same time saying, how do we control black folk now? They said, now that we got all these blacks coming to the country, we got a good thing going. They said, because now all over Europe was being advertised, if you want to become wealthy and powerful, go to America. We guarantee if you go to America, we give you free land and free labor. You'd have to be an idiot not to get rich. You don't have to do anything. We'll give you all the land you want and England started a franchising system, so which means even if you couldn't afford to buy slaves, we had a franchising concept, which means England would give you the land and give you the slaves. All you do is pay them a commission, just like McDonald's and Burger King. That's where the whole franchising concept came from. It was from England with slavery. And so people rushed into this country, but they had to set up external controls, saying, how do we control them when they get here? With all these blacks coming into the country, because I just told you 6 out of every 7 persons coming across the Atlantic were black folks. They were pouring into the country, but they want to make sure enough whites are here to benefit and get the fruits of black folks' labor. And so they passed the cultural diversity, which says, the cultural diversity law says, for every 5 blacks you own, you must have 1 white person. You must always have 1 white person there to monitor, to make sure that black folk are being monitored and kept under control, that you understand what they're up to. That law stayed into effect and never went out of effect. Now comes 1710. Now when 1710 came, here's the main point of my talk today. 1710 did something that is totally devastating. Totally devastating. The Virginia colony in 17 passed what they call meritorious manumission. Meritorious manumission says, what we're going to do now that we put up the external controls in 1705, we must have internal controls. We don't have the time to go around and monitor and watch all these black folk coming into this country. We must build in some kind of internal management control. We must build in a way like the Rodney King syndrome, that kind of thing. And we must build into black folk an inappropriate behavior pattern. We must teach black folks to see things upside down in a non-realistic manner. And what they did very systematically was like taking glasses and painting pictures on it upside down. And we found out in laboratories in sociology and psychology that even if you paint the world upside down for a person to put glasses on their eyes, we found that the subjects can learn to live upside down. They learn how to adjust, learn how to adjust their reach and what they're doing. We watch it over and over again in experiments with young people in school, where we paint the pictures upside down and say, what do you see? And the mind has the ability to flip things back over to where the reality becomes the unreal. That the unreal becomes the reality. And once you do that, you got your people nailed to the wall. So meritorious manumission came into effect in 1710 and says, we will reward, we will recognize, we will set free any black person that does 1 of 4 things. 1, if you in fact will save a white person's life. I told you about the young man on the boat with the eagle, 5, 6 years before that. If you save a white person's life, you will get your freedom. 2, if you protect the white person's property. 3, if you invent something that a white person can make wealth and power off of, some kind of invention. And 4, if you in fact will squeal on, inform on, or tell on your own people. That was called meritorious manumission. Now, you all might say, why is that important? I'm going to tell you, that was so devastatingly important. And the reason it was so important is because that created a magnificent control system that has never been duplicated. Never been duplicated. As a matter of fact, it's only been replicated one time that I know of, and I'm usually pretty current on most issues in this country, psychological, sociological, and educational in this country. Only one time it's been duplicated. It was duplicated in the 1950s. The communists duplicated it in Korea. They call it brainwashing. Now, you might ask, what is brainwashing? Now, typically people in the 1950s, when it happened in the Korean War, we talked about brainwashing. See, now I was a safety and survival engineer for my squadron. I was in a Marine TAC squadron. My primary responsibility was to teach my people how to survive. We had a school for brainwashing in Barbers Point, Hawaii. Teach them how to survive. What's brainwashing? Well, most people, at least the guys in the Marine Corps, they thought that brainwashing would be some kind of an inhumane way of treating people. That it would be no less than pulling out fingernails, driving bamboo splinters between the joints, hanging people up in the cold and castrating them, what we call the Chinese water torture. But brainwashing was none of those things. It was none of those things. Brainwashing was simply a very sophisticated form of re-education. And see, for you all in the auditorium this morning, brainwashing, so that you'll always remember, is nothing but group therapy run in reverse. You always remember that. Now, the whole point of group therapy is to bring people together. Brainwashing is to turn it backwards and scatter people apart. And that was very effective in Korea against our troops. And see, I'm going to show you the different parallel of what happened in 1710 and what happened in 1950, so you can understand the implications of what happened to black folk in America. Otherwise, you can't deal with the issue. So in 1950, we had approximately 7,000 Americans in prisoner of war camps in North Korea and China. 7,000 Americans have been captured and put into war camps before they were subjected to brainwashing. And after they were subjected to brainwashing, starting from the time they were captured, do you know that in that course of time, almost 4 years, we did not have one single solitary American prisoner that escaped from a prisoner of war camp? That had never happened in the history of this nation. That you can contain that many soldiers in one or two places and never have one to escape. Not one escaped out of 7,000 in almost 4 years. And to tell you the truth, in some of those camps, they didn't even have fences or walls up. Some of them didn't even have a guard. And our people could not escape because of the techniques of brainwashing that was used on them. You would say, now, what was happening to them? They were being devastated, to be re-educated. And this is the same identical technique that was used in 1710 on black folk. The whole concept of integration was the same thing that today. They scattered them. Now, what happened in Korea? In Korea, we noticed certain kind of things were happening to the prisoners. They didn't act like prisoners anymore. See, when a guy when he was captured as a prisoner, the first responsibility was to try to escape, not to participate, not to cooperate with the enemy, not to compromise one's principles. It's always try to fight, resist, and get out, and to compete to help your own people to escape if you can. Didn't happen in Korea. Because you see, brainwashing, reverse technique of group therapy, first of all, what it did, it divided the soldiers against each other. Divides the soldiers against each other. And there's a whole revolutionary principle that says that a revolution comes when two people get together and begin to conspire. You can never have a revolution or an insurrection on earth as long as you drive a wedge between the first two people. You drive a wedge between the first two people, you'll never have a revolt. And in Korea, we never had the revolt. Secondly, people can only organize if they get together. But see, what the communists did, they started an information system, a squealing system, an informing system. And what we found in Korea was they had the most massive, widespread information system ever on earth, where people were recognizing other people or identifying other people who were planning on escaping. And what the communists were doing was telling people, look, you all got a responsibility now as a prisoner. If you hear about another prisoner talking about escaping, it's your responsibility to inform on him and tell on him. And if you do that, we'll reward you. You get an extra candy bar and apple. And once that happens, you see pretty soon, the soldiers didn't know who to trust anymore. They didn't know who to tell anything to. If he was planning on escaping, who did he tell? These are when the other guys were going to turn him in for a reward. And so the organization broke down. Like they quit communicating and sharing information to each other. So all of a sudden you were planning on escape. Next day someone drags you out in the cold, strips you down, and pours ice water on you and it's 26 below zero. Because somebody just turned you in for an apple and a piece of candy. And see, that's what's happening in meritorious manumission in 1710. The blacks are being rewarded for turning in other blacks. See, also what it does is not only does it stop your communication, it stops your business, your ability to organize, but also it broke down what we have to have as a sense of community. In none of those camps do they have a sense of community anymore in Korea. Without a sense of community, you have no way of doing the things that have to be done as a human being. And so in the prison war camps in Korea, all of a sudden the camps became filthy, the black camps. Nobody built latrines. Nobody made sure there was food and blankets passed out. Nobody took care of the sick. Because you don't have a community anymore. Without a community, you can't do anything. So we didn't have a community in Korea, in the camps. And out of the 7,000 prisoners you had in Korea, almost half of them died. They didn't die because anybody shot them. They died from the fact that they were unable to function appropriately to take care of themselves, to function as a community. They no longer had what you gotta have and what black folk had taken from them through meritorious manumission. See, once you get a community, the next thing you must have above that is your trust. You cannot have trust if you don't have a community. I always hear black folks say, Dr. Evans, all the things you say are true, but how can I get together another black folk when I don't trust them? You don't trust them because you don't have a community. And and above trust comes cooperation. But Dr. Evans, I don't want to work with him. No, because you don't trust him. So it goes community, trust, cooperation. And that's what they did in Korea. They killed the community. The black soldiers no longer had community, and prisoners no longer had a sense of community. They no longer had a sense of who they were, what they were about, the business of, and who they were. And all of a sudden, that kind of an oppressive system of rewarding people for identifying with the enemy, and that's what the Koreans were doing, saying you identify with us, and we'll reward you and give you candy and an apple. And when they started rewarding people, the community was destroyed. And their soldiers fell apart. And over half of them died. And the next thing that happened to them, what also happened to the black community, after 1710, we moved into a thing what we call give-up-itis. All of a sudden, the soldiers in Korea, in those camps, no longer cared about anything anymore. When I come into the Crenshaw district, and I said, why don't you do this? Because we don't care anymore. Same thing happened in the prison war camp. The soldiers didn't care. And once they lost caring, it was through. Nobody could save them anymore. And at night, over 40% of those soldiers would pull blankets over their head and just sit there in the corner and die for no apparent reason. Not for physical reasons. It was called give-up-itis, and you've seen it in hospitals. That's when a person would die long before he's supposed to. And you ask why. When a husband passed and the wife would die 6 months later, 3 months later. Not for any medical reason, because they no longer have a will to live. And that's what happened in those camps. We lost over half our soldiers because they lost their will to live. And see, after meritorious manumission was put on black folk in 1710, black folk, a lot of them began to lose their will to live and to care and be responsible. So jumping back to 1710, so you understand what brainwashing is and the impact on black folk. I want you all to understand that. That was a re-educational system. So when that happened in 1710, the word spread. And down in Jamaica, there was a fellow named Willie Lynch that heard about it. And he was already running a seasoning school for slaves in the South, in Jamaica. So then he caught a boat and headed for America, headed for Virginia, where the meritorious manumission had been initially enacted. He got there in 1712. And just like the communists did in Korea, he came up with the same expression, gentlemen, I'm here to take care of your needs. I can show you how to do what you want to have done. I can show you how to divide these slaves so they'll never recover, or at least it'll take 300 years before they can do it. So some of you might wonder why I picked in my book the year 2013. This coming year in 2013 will be almost exactly 300 years since Willie Lynch put his message on black folk. He said it would take 300 years. He said, what I'll do is to show you how you divide blacks. You divide blacks along the lines of skin color. You rig it so every black will look at another black skin color first and say, is he a yellow black or black black? And that way you've already divided them. You divide them along the lines of sex, so that all of a sudden you have black women joining the feminist movement against their own black men. They're trying to beat them out of jobs and opportunity and visibility to take care of their families. So you divide them along the lines of sex. Then you divide them along the lines of age, where the old turn against the young turn against the old and say, you're ancient, you're old, I don't want to listen to you anymore. And it worked very effectively. And Willie Lynch put that on them. It's called divide and conquer. Divide and conquer was the same in 1710 as it was in 1950 in Korea. And black folk became invited. And so from 1750 up to about from 1710 up to 1750, the system started going into effect. The social conditioning, the brainwashing of black folks took off full steam then. Well, see, now they were very concerned about all these black slaves. We had to control them. And people said, well, how are we going to control them? They said the first way, and there are three ways you do it, but the first way is by physical control. Always control a black person physically. That's what slavery is about. The second way of controlling was called Jim Crowism. Then you control him legally. And the third way you control him is when we came out of the civil rights movement, which means symbolically. You control him by manipulating symbols. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. So they went into the first thing of controlling black folk physically with slavery. By 1750, the black population got up to 34% in America. And they were very concerned about this because you see all these slaves were pouring in across the water, so they started advertising to bring in more immigrants. They said, what we need are more white immigrants to dilute. Remember I told you the Diversity Act said we must have so many whites. So we got to have an immigration law that bring in more whites to neutralize blacks out, to keep them contained, to keep them as a minority. We'll fix it so they'll love that word minority. They'll use it all the time and call themselves that. Even though we know the minority means loser. We'll turn the world upside down, they call themselves loser, loser, loser. So by 1750, black population hit 34%. So what the white society started doing then is said, we must do what they didn't say that then, but the effect was saying what happened in Korea. We must isolate them. So every Indian treaty from that point on started putting in conclusions saying that you must also stay away from black folk. They built into all the Indian treaties incentives for them not to identify with black folks because they afraid that if Indians and blacks got together, they could overthrow the country. So Indians were given incentives then to turn against black people. And that's why later on you find that the biggest killers of black folks for a long period of time were Indians. Because they were given incentives. For instance, if you raided a town or a village, guess who was the first person you run into in the field? Was a black person. And see, you had laws because of the slave codes of 1705 says a black person could not arm himself, he couldn't carry a weapon, he couldn't carry a tool, he could not raise his hand to defend himself, he could not strike back. So Indians said, hey, we got a good guy to raid. I mean, this is like shooting ducks. And the whites knew that. And they put the blacks out in the field, they used blacks for burglar alarms. So every time there was an Indian raid, they the ones who went down first. And that's why all the 5 civilized tribes in America then became slaveholders. All the 5 civilized Indian tribes were slaveholders. Not only a slaveholder, they were slave traders. And more important than that, in all the treaties, typically in a treaty, they paid the Indians $20 for every runaway slave they chased down and brought him back. And that's why also when the Civil War came, all the 5 civilized tribes in America fought with the side of the South to prefer slavery because they didn't want to lose their money and wealth either. I still have blacks running around saying, well, I'm half Indian. Nobody wants to be black. I mean, even if there's people that have been misusing your people too, but you don't want to be it. They'll tell me about how, well, I'm 3/4 white. I can't stand black folk. I'm 3/4 white. I said, well, why would you want to be white rather than black? I said, blacks didn't enslave you. Blacks didn't Jim Crow you. Blacks didn't castrate and lynch you and exploit you. And see, that's that upside down, that would make black folks see things upside down and wrong, the inappropriate behavior. Inappropriate behavior pattern was instituted on us to make sure we saw everything backwards. That way when we ran, we thought we were running the right way, we were running the wrong way, and they knew it. And that's why you later hear me tell black folk all over America that my people, black folk, are doing everything wrong. They're not even doing wrong right. Because everything's pointed upside down for us, so they can't see which way to run. And so at that time, in 1750, the colonies then tried to figure out how to contain the whole issue. So we got our controls in place, we got the social conditioning in place, and I think we got blacks pretty well where we need them. We got them nailed down. So then they then started telling England, don't send any more slaves over here to make sure it works. The Continental Congress sent all kinds of letters to England saying, don't send any more slaves to make sure our system of control works. But England said, no, I'm going to keep sending them, we're getting rich off of it. England said, we're making a fabulous amount of money because we set up the Navigation Act in 1650, which says, I don't care what you all produce in America, it must come back to England first to be processed, and you all buy it back from us. And when you buy it back from us, we're going to charge you 3 or 4 times the price of it. And so when England decided to have a Revolutionary War to break away from England, they didn't put that in the history book, what the real reason they want to break away from England for. 1, because they were scared to death of black folks getting free over here and tying them with the Indians. 2, they wanted to reverse that whole shipping process, saying that we've made all the products in America, we raise the cotton, the corn, the beans, the rice, and everything. Why are we sending it to you and buying it back from you? So that's what the Revolutionary War was over. And plus, England was also getting rich off the slaves, because England was only paying $25, $35 a piece for every slave they were buying on the west coast of Africa. $25 to $35 a piece. But they created a system called capitalism, which says that I also want a 1,500% return on my money, my investment. If I pay $25 for a black slave on West Africa, I want to be able to sell them in America for $400 to $500 a piece. And so England was becoming a very rich and powerful nation, like most people. But that was not only England, but you had all the other slave countries became rich. That was Portugal, Spain, England, Germany, and the Arab nations. All of them were getting wealthy off of black folk, off a combination of 2 things, extracting the wealth out of Africa, material wealth, and selling the human labor. And after the Revolutionary War, first act of Congress, as soon as they set up a Congress in the United States, the first act of Congress said, let's solve this problem with the slaves. So the first thing they did was pass what they call the First Immigration Act. It says this is a white nation, and the quota on blacks coming here other than as a slave is 0. 0, zip, none, nothing. And that stayed in effect until 1966, when it was raised to 1/2 of 1%. And I still see black folks displaying inappropriate behavior. They can't figure out why you cannot get Haitians into the country. I said, God knows, don't you know what your law is? The reason you cannot get Haitians into the country because they're still fearful of you getting a large, significant black population and being a threat to the society. I said, anytime you got boats floating around off the west coast of Africa for 3 months, you had over 3,000, 4,000 blacks on there who were sick, starving to death. Not one single country offered to bring them in, not this country. At the same time, this country's had refugee programs for every racial and ethnic extraction on earth but black folk. And where's our civil rights leaders? Where's our black leadership? Why aren't they raising issues about it? Instead of them going down there and say, why can't blacks come in from the islands and from Haiti? They do the same thing because they're seeing things upside down and backwards. They do the same thing the whites do. Say, well, what we need to do is invade that country and make them stay there. Let's improve the conditions there. And so that way they have nice places there. Rather than say, no, you didn't improve all the conditions in Mexico, and El Salvador, and Nicaragua, and Hungary, and all these other countries when the people came in. You didn't improve all the conditions in Vietnam to bring in the people. Why do you keep asking these special things black? No leadership to raise the question. Because you see no black leadership in America wants to raise the real issues about why we cannot raise our population and others can. In a social democracy where the majority will win and the minority will lose, we are the only planned, systematically, permanently classified minority. Which means that we are the only people who will always lose based on immigration laws and the quotas coming into this country. Unless we start to develop some very specific ways of dealing with it. That's what powernomics is about. I start telling you, you got to start changing the rules, turn things back upside down. You got to always practice how do you get to be the majority. Never do anything where you're going to be a minority. Do it where you're going to become the majority. Don't move to be a minority, move to be a majority. We're going to talk about that a little later on how you play these games and learn how to win in powernomics. But you see, as I said, by 1790, the law had locked us out as the only permanent loser. And they said that anybody losing in society from now on, it would be black people. They're the only people that cannot increase their population significantly to be a threat to this country. By the late part of 1790, they said what other kind of external controls can we put on black folks? Because now some of them want to learn, some of them want to try to join the religious movement in this country. And in religion, we say that everybody's a brother. And if we baptize them and make them a Christian, how do we deal with that fact? So they passed a law saying that Christianity did not relieve your heathenism for a black person. And they did not want, after that time, a few blacks had been going to church, but they were sitting in white churches, and they had to be monitored and watched, as I told you, because of the Diversity Act. So when the evangelical movement started moving through this country in the turn of the first in 1800s, early 1800s, they said, we'll let blacks have their churches, but we can always also, but we must pick the ministers. We must license the ministers. We must pick ministers that we can control. No black preacher can come into America unless he is controlled by the white establishment. Unless he represents our interests and our values, unless he teaches our form of Christianity. Now, this is very important. Why? Because you see, before, religion was always used to help a population group. When it comes to blacks, we cannot let religion be used to help them. You see, the Catholic Church took care of all those groups who call themselves Catholics. Jews, priests, took care of the Jews. And even today, you go into the conflicts in England or Ireland, where you see the Protestants and the Catholics fighting. I guarantee you that the Protestant members will be representing their people and protecting them. I guarantee you that the Catholic priests will be representing the Catholics and protecting them. If I take you into the Middle East with the Arabs, I guarantee you Khomeini will be taking care of Arabs. Only in America can I find black ministers who can be bought and sold to be against their own people. Nobody else will let you do that. No population will tolerate that except our people. And that's what I call inappropriate behavior. Inappropriate behavior pattern when you let your own minister sell you out. It's not in your best interest. What I mean by sell you out is because by the early 1800s, the whites said, well, we're going to have black ministers. We're going to have to Christian them to make sure they do what we want to have done. They must teach Christianity the way we want it taught, so where it is an external control device on black folk. They said, what are the rules? One, that every minister we license must teach black folk. If you talk about the slave and the master in the Bible, that you're talking about the white man and the black man on earth. Two, the minister must teach black folk that they're to be loyal, faithful, obedient, respectful, and all those other good things, and honest, so that white people don't have to worry about them stealing as a slave. Because black slaves had a nasty habit of going around stealing scraps of food because they were starving to death. They were telling me they must be industrious. So you see, white folks want you to work a little harder. So they use the term, he's a lazy slave. Now, anybody in his right mind got more than a third-grade education would say, why would a slave want to be industrious? Why would you want to work hard as a slave? What's in it for you? Are you going to get released early? You can get a pension? Social Security or retirement? But they always got this thing about, why, he's a lazy slave. I even got a black writer writes about that day. Part of the problem is the blacks were lazy slaves. He should have been lazy. The third thing they put on you is that, well, the black ministers must also teach them to get pie in the sky after death. They're going to turn their world upside down. So while everybody else is competing to get resources, to get wealth, to get power, black folk are saying, I'm waiting for mine in the sky. They said, well, the role model would be Jesus Christ. Is, Jesus Christ and all the Jews were very powerful people, had money. Solomon was the richest man on earth. You go look at Matthew, I think Matthew 23, when they start talking about the talent. But different slaves had talents. And two of them went out and developed their talents and multiplied and made something. And one buried and hid his. Because they knew there would be that black one, to be that last one, go out and hide it. Y'all understand what I'm talking about? Now, but during that period of time, though, in the 1800s, when they started putting all the religion on them, they started controlling them, a few blacks said, well, wait a minute now, because something just happened down in Haiti. Now, I know that I can guess in the future, y'all aren't going to let the Haitians into this country. But in the 1800s, what happened was Toussaint Overture. Toussaint Overture took his little band of rabble-rousing blacks in Haiti and beat the devil out of all the French troops. Ran them raggedy. Beat the devil out of them. Now, that was important because, for two reasons. First of all, that is the only time in Western history where the white society blinked and black folks took advantage of them and beat them. Y'all remember that? Only time in history that blacks ever broke free of that conditioning system I told you in 1710, the same one they used again in in the Korean War. And again, the reason I want to point out that system to you, that brainwashing system, why is it so important? You all remember this, and why it's so important. And that's why I must give the dominant white society praise for this. I mean, there's some very smart people. Very smart. Why did I say that? Because, you see, the people that put that system on black folk in 1710, they had the equivalent of a third or fourth grade education. And here we are today, 250 years later, or 200 some years later, almost 300, and black folk with doctor's degrees and master's degrees can't figure it out. Now, but little Toussaint Overture down in Haiti, he won his battle, beat him good. Now that meant when he beat him though, they finally tricked him and said, well, now that you've beaten us, wouldn't you like to come together and integrate? He went to discuss it with them at a meeting. They captured him, put him on a boat and shipped him to someplace in Europe, some country way up in the Iceland, one of those, I think Finland or someplace. And was frozen to death up there in the prison. Because he went to co-op, and I told you in Korea. In Korea and the brainwashing techniques, there's another principle that says that anytime you want to control anybody, I can control anybody who's willing to talk and compromise and discuss with me. I can get him to compromise. And see, what we're trying to teach our soldiers was called a code of conduct in Korea, which says never talk to your enemy. Unless it's on your turf and your terms. And see, right now, what I'm assistant police commissioner, I'm working as a therapist for prisoners. Anytime I get somebody to communicate and talk with me, I got him. If he'll speak to me and answer my questions, I got him. Sooner or later, he's going to break down and tell me what I want to know. The way you resist is you don't communicate. You don't compromise your principles. They can never beat you then. And see, and that's how they got Overture. They asked him, don't you want some integration? Like they told our leaders, the same thing. Now, there were some other blacks who jumped up and said, I'm not going to go for that okie doke. One of the first ones in 1800 was Gabriel Prosser. Gabriel was an extremely smart black guy. He says, I just heard about what Toussaint Overture did down in the islands. And said, if Toussaint can do it, I'm going to do it here. He said, I'm going to do the same thing. And he did some planning and you couldn't believe. He worked, he planned, he schemed. Prosser really worked on his thing. And he planned one of the most devastatingly, strategically well-planned insurrections on earth. Now, but before I tell you what he did, let me go back and make this point. I tracked between 1710 and 1860, and we had a possible 150 to 200 possible slavery votes. And in all 150 to 200 of them, a black person squealed in every one of them and got his meritorious manumission and his Willie Lynch badge card. And so when Prosser was trying to pull his together, he planned his scheme. And for the day he was supposed to have his big revolt, would you believe one of the most severe storms that had ever hit Virginia came in and washed out most of the land and roads and bridges, and Prosser's group couldn't get together at their gathering point because they were planning on hitting three things. They were planning on taking over the penitentiary in Richmond, they were planning on taking over the armory, and they were planning on attacking the town and annihilating the town, everybody except the Methodists and the Quakers who had befriended them. And the storm struck just as they were going to assemble. And only 300 showed up, and Prosser said, well, since only 300 of us here, let's put it off until next week when the land is dry and clear. And within 3 days, a black person squealed. Prosser was arrested, along with 35 of his supporters. They were executed, hanged, and heads chopped off and put on poles. But the two blacks that did the squealing, one was called Tom, the other was called Pharaoh. And I don't know, God knows it because I don't know. Why is the name of a black person Tom? You almost guess he's going to do something. Now, I don't know, and I don't mean to put down anybody here named Tom, but there's something about that name. And Pharaoh itself is not too much of an exciting name. I wouldn't trust that name either. If somebody, my mother named me Pharaoh, I know I'm in a world of trouble too. But anyway, Tom and Pharaoh turned in Prosser. They executed Prosser, chopped his head off, along with some others, and hung him up on poles. But the thing that became very important in that case, though, was that the town was really fearful because they found out from rumors that Prosser had lined up somewhere between 5,000 and 50,000 slaves. The whites all through Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina was paralyzed. Their mouths fell open, their eyes popped, they said, something is wrong. You mean to tell me we put a conditioning system on black folk where we turn everything upside down? And this black guy was able to do the impossible without an education? Something is wrong with our system. What's wrong? And I'm serious, this was a big issue. They had to find out how this one black guy get together as a slave and have something between 5,000 and 50,000 blacks ready to fight. And had it not been for a storm, they'd have taken over the country. And finally came out to another rumor, speculation, that what it was that he had beat the symbolism. To show you how important symbols are, that's why I keep telling about powernomics. To get out of your system, sometimes you're lost. You look up at a mountain, you look up at a peak, you look for the Penobscot building or the Empire State Building, you find your symbol, you can find your direction. And what that black Prosser done, he looked at the state seal. The state of Virginia had a seal where it had a white man lying prostrate and a black man's foot on his chest. White and the black guy was called, and in the seal it said, Verticus overcomes Tyrannus. And that black man had used that seal as his motivating force, his guiding light for his people. And when whites found that out, immediately they changed the Virginia seal and said, get rid of that seal fast. and put up guards around the Capitol to make sure it didn't happen again. And that was in 1800. By 1821, another black named Vicki got equally as concerned. He had heard about it. He said he's going to try it in South Carolina. Try another revolt. But Vicki says up front, Vicki organized his group. He walked around, he was a free black. He got free because he bought his own, paid $600 and freed himself. He won money in a lottery. But he's very upset because he couldn't buy his children out of slavery. So Vicki would walk through the town in Charleston, South Carolina, telling black folk, get that hump out of your back. Straighten up, be respectful, take care of your own people. Look out for your own people. Quit trying to worry about everybody and look out for yourselves. And Vicki was he was a big man too, a big broad man. He said, I'll break your back if I catch you bending over. And he planned an insurrection. He called something like about 300 to 500 together to take over Charleston, South Carolina. But he told them up front, he said, let me tell you all something. He says, if I catch one black in this group trying to get meritorious manumission, he said, I'm gonna snap your neck like a twig. And he planned a revolt. And unfortunately, again, 2 days before his revolt was supposed to occur, not only was he squealed on once, he was squealed on twice. So Vicki was picked up along with about 37 of his people and hung. Because again, they sold him out. Then by 1831, Nat Turner, you already know about, tried the same thing a few years later, in 31. Nat Turner says that I'm not even gonna go through those changes. I'm not gonna do what Vicki did. I'm not gonna do what Prosser did. I'm not even gonna play that silly game. He said, what I'm telling you I'm gonna do? He said, I'm gonna break out of here. I'm getting me a knife, gun, sword, stick, tools, bricks, anything I can get. I'm killing anything I see that moves, crawls, jumps, walks, or talks. That's exactly what I'm quoting him. He says, I'm the rod and staff of God. I'm not playing these silly games. I'm tired. And so Turner started walking, saying he was a sword and the voice of God. He said, I'm gonna kill anything I see moving. He killed 55 people, including his own master. And then the country got petrified again and sent the army in looking for him. They searched for Nat Turner for 2 months and couldn't find him. He hid out because he killed so many people. Until one day he needed food and went down to get some blacks to get some food. And guess what happened? Turned them in. And so that took care of Nat Turner. Same time, there's one other black though, which is my hero. I don't know how much time I got. As long as I want. Okay. Okay, thank you. You see, you all are so nice. That's why I love coming to this city. Boy, I swear, I love you. I'm gonna move out here pretty soon. But my hero is John Horace. We start talking about inappropriate behavior versus appropriate behavior. Now here's a black man at the same time period displayed what I call appropriate behavior. No Rodney King stuff, you see? John Horace was a runaway slave who would also run off to Florida in the early 1800s in the same period when Vicki and Turner and the rest of them were trying to revolt. John Horace was a big, burly, strong black man. He ran off to Florida. Contrary to what you hear all the time in the media about the Underground Railroad, all blacks trying to get north, get to the promised land. That's part of that myth. Most blacks weren't that dumb. Why would they want to go all the way across go to the north 1,000 miles through a hostile white country when they could run off to Florida, which is Spanish territory 20 miles away or 2 feet away? So some of the smarter blacks of our relatives ran off to Florida because that was Spanish territory. And they got down and they interbred and intermixed with the Seminoles. Now you all might ask me why about Seminoles. Now Seminoles were also against blacks, a lot of them, but a lot of them were not. Seminoles were the most receptive Indians to do anything with blacks in the country. Why? Because you see the word Seminole means runaway slave. Okay? And they were also runaways. They interbred with blacks. They were a mixture of blacks. So they were very receptive to black folk. And so They started fighting in that area to fight the United States because the United States, they want to go down there and try to get the slaves back. And that's what they were sending General Andrew Jackson to Florida for, to get the slaves. Because you see, blacks down there were coming across the border periodically with the Indians, raiding and killing whites and getting their people free. Now, why is that important? Because you see, when I talked about early inappropriate behavior in Africa, the reason they enslaved black folk originally was because our leaders in Africa had given the impression that I don't care about other black folk. And they hauled all those blacks around the world because they knew in their hearts they would never see a shipload of Africans coming to get them back. They never suspected that Africans would come to save Africans. But that's why they didn't try to enslave Indians, because they knew if they didn't enslave Indians, Indians would come get their people. But they knew that black leadership in Africa had already said, you can have them, I don't want them, I won't come to get them. And so when the blacks went off into the South, into Florida, they were coming across the border, raiding those plantations along Alabama and the Georgia border there, South Carolina border, taking their people, taking them back to down to Florida, getting them free. But John Horse was a leading hero to me. Now this black hooked up, he became sort of like the second in charge in in Florida. The chief at that time through the 1820s and 1830s was a chief named Osceola. Osceola had about 3 sons that were very active also, fighting white intrusion into Florida to get the slaves back. His number 1 son was a mixture of black and white. His name was Wildcat. And Osceola himself, if you all don't know it, Osceola was married to a black woman. You might see Osceola's pictures in all the museums as an Indian. They don't ever tell you that he was married to a black woman and had a mixed group. And he married to a black woman. His black woman's name was Morning Dew, if you're interested in knowing it. Morning Dew was the one, and that's what triggered the Seminole Wars. They don't tell you that in your history books either. So going back and forth down there, they were trying to get the Indians back. trying to get the slaves back from the Indians. And they kept sending the federal troops in there. And Andrew Jackson was one of the primary generals that always wanted to go out there and fight Indians. He loved to fight Indians. He's known as the Indian fighter. And that's why you have Jacksonville, Florida. Because he was going in there, again, fighting Indians and trying to get blacks back. And on the Chattahoochee River, right outside Tallahassee, they had a fort there called Fort Negro, where most of the blacks were living, staying there. And they sent the federal troops down there to get the slaves back. Then the federal boat came up the Chattahoochee River to Fort Negro, and most of the blacks were out with the Indians raiding, fighting, and left the women and kids there. And so the federal troops fired on Fort Negro. One shot, and a shot rolled into the armory and set off the explosion and blew up the entire fort. And there was nothing in there but black women and children. And that really made them hostile. The blacks were hostile this time. So now, that triggered the second Seminole War. After that, they decided to have a truce. They said, we'll have a truce if we sit down with Osceola and his warriors, John Horse and the rest of them. And at that point in time, they met. Before they met, they went and kidnapped Morning Dew and told Osceola that if you want your wife back, you better turn some of those black slaves loose and meet with us. And when Osceola went to the meeting to discuss getting his wife back, they kidnapped him and put him in prison. I think up in Fort Sumter, South Carolina. He died of consumption and exposure. And so at that point in time, John Horse and Wildcat went berserk. Then they started fighting. They fought all the way throughout Florida. And finally, when they ran them out of Florida, they went out west and led some of that whole movement called the Trail of Tears, all the way out to Oklahoma territory. And but the only people who were fighting in this country against the United States at that time was John Horse and Wildcat and his band of blacks. They had carried their own women and kids with them. That is the only black man in the history of this nation, and I'm sorry to say no school teaches that. That's the only black man in America that's ever stood up to America and fought them, and not as a slave, but as a man. Nobody else has ever done it. John Horse fought the United States for 50 years. They fought him all out west. They chased him all down through the west, through Oklahoma, through Texas, and finally chased him into Mexico. He went into Mexico and stayed there for about 5 or 6 years, and came back again, he and Wildcat. They tried to set up their little village again, but the whites out there, the racists kept raiding their camps, shooting them and killing them. He kept fighting, and they finally killed Wildcat, shot him in the back with a shotgun and killed him. And then the John Horse finally just gave up and got on his horse, allegedly, and just rolled off back into Mexico. You never heard from him again. But he fought for 50 years, the only black man. You can talk about any civil rights leader you want to. If you had a hero, that's the only hero we ever had that fought and says, I'm not a slave and I won't take it. I'm not Rodney King or anybody else. And so, they found, nobody ever knew what had happened to him, but he rolled off. That was John Horse. Now, this whole meritorious manumission policy is in effect, moving along at the same time, this control system. About 1852, a lady named Harriet Beach Stover wanted to write about it. So she then wrote about the whole thing. She interviewed a guy whose name was Henderson, which you all know as Uncle Tom. He then told about the story. She wrote a book called Uncle Tom's Cabin. But in that book, contrary to what most people think, Uncle Tom was not the bad guy. The bad guy was Sambo. And so I'm asking you all as my brothers and sisters, please in the future don't call a black guy who you know is worthless and trifling. Don't call him Uncle Tom, that's complimenting him. Call him his real name, what he's entitled to, and that's a Sambo. Any black person sells his own people out and will do them in, he is a Sambo. Now, what is a Sambo again? Going back to meritorious manumission in 1710, the whole conditioning process, the whole brainwashing system, the whole social engineering system says that you must teach black people to see the world through the eyes of whites. You must see everything through their eyes. You must accept their values, their superiority, whatever they think and feel, and that way we got you contained. And that's why when you see somebody like Colin Powell running for office, they say, well, you can run for office if you see the things the way we want to see them. If you want to be conservative, you can run for office. If you want to place a lot of importance on abortion, you can run for office. If you want to talk about being anti-taxing, you can run for office, which means that if you see things the way we see them as a black person, you're safe. You're acceptable. And if you don't want to do that way, then become an athlete or an entertainer. So therefore, don't you identify the rest of those blacks in the country. You stay away from them. They're bad. And you start going on, you try to go get a penny out of an athlete and entertainer, do something for the black community. They're going to do it. Their advisors won't let them do it. The agents won't do it. Their promotion people won't let them do it. They're going to identify with your community because, again, they have now already died and gone to heaven. Okay, so when Harriet Beecher Stowe put out her book, what she tried to tell black folk is that Uncle Tom was not a bad guy. See, Uncle Tom, you read that book, and most blacks, 90% of blacks never read it. They always call another black, he's an Uncle Tom, he's an Uncle Tom. He's not an Uncle Tom. If you read the book Uncle Tom was a guy who would not beat black women. Uncle Tom in that book was a guy who would not beat other blacks to make them pick more cotton. Uncle Tom was a guy who would come in at night and take cotton out of his own bag and put it in other black folks' bags so they wouldn't get whippings at night. Uncle Tom was a guy who would not tell where black folk were hiding when they went across the river and they broke free as slaves. But Simon Legree, the white slave master, had a black that followed him around named Sambo, who always says, you show me, give me the right, I'll show you how to trees the coons. I'll show you where they hide. And see, that's the guy. See, his role responsibility is going back to meritorious manumission. I told you about when you got to protect white folks' property and protect their wealth. He says, I will protect it and find it for you. And that's why you read in the movies and books that came out after Uncle Tom, you always had a black guy, a black slave, was running down the road saying, Master, master, here comes the army, let's hide our silver and gold. And you all say, our? How did it get to be our? You know, he always wants to say something that doesn't even belong to him. And that showed up all through history. And today you got the same kind of personality doing it. And now he's not saying let's hide our silver and gold. He's called himself a conservative. I'm also against affirmative action for black folk. I'm against quotas. I'm against preferential treatment. Even had one running around talking about he want to pass a law to stop black folk from discriminating against whites. You still got that kind of personality that always wants to protect something, protect the strong. You always got that kind of Sambo personality. And nowadays, the best way to get rich is to say, I'm gonna practice that masters, gold and silver, and I'm gonna be against them black folk. I guarantee I can get you a radio talk show. I can get you a television show. I can even get you an appointment to the Supreme Court. Okay? You tell me how many black folk you want to sell out, and I guarantee I'll show you how to make money. Because you see, every ethnic group, every religious group, every racial group, every political group has always made money off of black folk. Okay? And what I'm going to start talking about in Powernomics when I come back here in the fall is to show you all one thing. I'm going to tell you is time is up. You have made, as a race, you made every religion, every ethnic group, every racial group rich. There is nobody else left on earth to make rich but yourselves. So that's all left. We got to do it by ourselves now. So don't give me this stuff about Dr. Anderson. That's the reverse discrimination. We are anti. You ain't anti nobody. You already made everybody rich. They always tell me, well, Dr. Anderson, what you're preaching isn't that segregation? Or let me tell y'all something. Starting again, back in 1850, blacks got hung up on that same mess, you know? By 1850, after Harriet Beecher Stover put out her book, here comes Frederick Douglass. He's gonna take one path. He's gonna go back now and try to pick up becoming an integrationist. He becomes an integrationist, taking that, since they excluded us in 1638, saying we should never be permitted to enjoy the fruits of white society, let's be integrationists and civil rights people. Let's make them let us in. So they started that top strand called integration, which will run Frederick Douglass, Booker T. Washington, then up to all your civil rights leaders, and Martin Luther King, and that whole group, all the way down the line to even your present-day civil rights group. They keep saying, we want access to whatever you own. We want to be included in whatever you own. Now you got another group that started after the book with Harriet Beecher Stover. They said they want to be segregationists. Then you got the more strongly willed person, like W.B. Du Bois. Then you got Martin Delaney. You got Marcus Garvey. Then you got Malcolm X and Elijah Muhammad. They were going the other way, saying, no, we want our separate stuff. Now, what I say by myself, and I know a lot of people might get upset when I say it, both groups were right and both groups were wrong. What I say is that it is not about integration. It is not, the issue is not segregation. The issue is congregation. It means aggregating. What it is called functional pluralism, which means we're not trying to integrate, we're not trying to segregate. No other group comes here and says, I want to integrate and segregate. What they're saying is that if I come together and concentrate as a people, concentrate my power and my wealth and my resources, I can compete. That's what they're talking about. And please, since I love all of you all, I'm gonna move here with you, don't let them trick you all anymore with them upside down glasses. They used to ask me that during integration about Dr. Anderson. Now hold it, now you at the governor's office in Florida, you represent the whole state in education. Now what do you want during integration? Do you want, you got Malcolm X talking about segregation, you got Martin Luther King talking about integration. Why don't y'all make up your mind, which do you want? I said, I don't want either one. I want the same rights and privileges that everybody else got to go to either one of the sticks. Don't try to put me on one end of the stick. What I want more than anything else is to bring my people together and say, get all the power and wealth together like everybody else. And that way, quit trying to give us, try to define us. You see, every Asian, for instance, when he leaves his homeland, he comes to America. He looks in the mirror and says, I'm going to America. And when I get to America, I'm going to find me a community of people that either look like me, or I'm going to build me a community of people that look like me, that have my values, my culture, my language. Nobody asks him about integration or segregation. When Hispanics come to this country, they would say, I'm going in, I'm going to build me a community of people that look like me or sound like me. And like the Asians who set up little Havanas, who set up little Cambodia, little Vietnam, Chinatowns in every city. The Hispanics come in, they'll build little Mexicos, little Havanas, little Hialeahs. I can go across America and find German towns, French towns, Greek towns, Polish towns, but I can't find a black town. Because of our inappropriate behavior pattern with the Rodney kids, we keep trying to integrate. Nobody else is trying to integrate. Why would you try to integrate? And I just told you in 1790, the law says in the Constitution that the majority will win and the minority will lose. If the majority will win and the minority will lose, why would you ever do anything that breaks yourself into smaller pieces when you already a plan systematically program the minority? Now you got other people in a category called minority. You got women, gay, Hispanic, anything you want. Midgets, Hispanics, anything you want. But nobody goes by there and say how many you can have. You've ever heard anybody say we can only have so many women in the country, or so many midgets in the country, or so many gay in the country, or so many the only thing they say is you must have is so many blacks. We're the only people. And see, and another thing you got to understand, I told you last time I was here, is that you got to remember that you are the only non-immigrants in America. The only non-immigrants. So when you start using a word for yourself, always call yourself a non-immigrant. Don't call yourself anything else other than that. Don't call yourself a minority. And to some degree, if you really want to be slick, I would even call myself an African American. Why not? I asked one girl in Texas, she said, I noticed you never call yourself an African American. She said, I said, why? She said, why is that? I said, because I'm black. You see? She said, but why? But are you still an African American? I said, no. Because you see, when I go look at the definition of African American, the whole north part of Africa is a continent. That's not a country, that's a continent. People coming in from El Salvador, and they're El Salvadorians. When you say you're from Africa, I'm an African. Where in Africa? Do y'all understand what I'm saying? Where in Africa? And plus that, and worse than that, is that the whole north part of Africa, those coming in the country, they are Arabs, Palestinians, Chaldeans, Egyptians. They're classified, those are whites coming in, but they also call themselves African Americans. When I go down through different parts of the west coast of Africa, I got people coming in from west coast of Africa. They are Pakistanis and Indians, East Indians, but they call themselves African Americans. When I go down to whites coming in from South Africa, they call themselves African Americans. And what they've done again is smother the issue over. So when I go look at it, when I go break it open, like cracking open an egg, like when I look inside the word minority, I look inside of African American, I find the number of blacks that came into the country last year out of 26,000 African Americans, I only find something like 4,000 blacks. And that's why they're gonna put the moves on you again. What they want to do is to cover it up again so you can't figure out what's happening to black folks. So new term, they're gonna say, well, we buried a lot of them under minorities, that concept. We buried a lot of them under the term Afro-American. Now let's come up with another term called multicultural. And Asian or Asia-Rasian or something, where nobody know what they are anymore. And see, if we bury them, see, nobody know what the conditions are for them anymore. They can't figure it out either. And see, that way we lock in the structural inequities. If racism, slavery, and Jim Crowism made whites 50-foot giants, and your problem is that whites got this much, you got that much, if you bury everything and smother it over, you'll never figure it out. You all gonna have to fight from now on to make sure that it's only black. Every issue is black, so you can find out what's happening to your people. They're gonna try to bury it because whites now got a choice. Either correct the structural inequities or hide it. And it's much cheaper to hide it. And one of the easiest ways of hiding it is to co-opt your leadership. To pay off the black leadership and bring them inside the circle, and they're not gonna make issues over anything. Instead of focusing on, as I said, your problem is the structural inequities. The structural inequities are so bad in America, and they have been so bad since slavery, that the civil rights and integration can't even reach black folk. They're so badly damaged and hurt. And I don't know why the blacks keep running around talking about we want civil rights and equality. You can't get equality if you're unequal. Unless, again, they put those glasses on you and turn them upside down, and all of a sudden you begin to see unequal as being equal. The worst kind of racism is the racism that pretends that unequal are equal. And that's what they've done to you. They got this whole new concept called a colorblind society. And what colorblind society means is let's be blind to black folks, pretend we don't see them. And they're hiding and smothering it again for you. And that's what it means. Now, where did that come from? It came from some of the white civil rights think tanks out of Washington. After the civil rights movement, what they wanted to do was say, let's bury the issue with black folk. And they gave our civil rights leaders a chance after the civil rights movement that made the difference. They didn't take it. Our black leadership displayed inappropriate behavior coming out of the civil rights movement. Throughout the civil rights movement, when they should have been focusing on the real issue, they didn't do it. Instead of focusing on correcting the historical damage that had been inflicted on black folk, they started messing around with civil rights and integration and never touched the problem. Ran all over the country, thinking that by taking down the signs over the water fountains or the bathrooms about colored only or black only, that they were dealing with racism. They didn't even touch racism. Racism was 3 stories down. Getting a black folk to sit in a white restaurant or sit on the front of a bus has no meaning at all. The second thing they did was they never had a plan. They ran all over the country from one demonstration, one march to the next one, never had a national plan about what they're going to do when they get there and what the next generation of blacks are going to do. And thirdly, they never built an institution to carry out a national plan. And when they did that, whites then changed their policy on blacks. They figured out black folk had displaying this inappropriate behavior and missed the boat. So what they did then, they said, let's put the moves on them. Johnson then wrote a law saying you got to correct the conditions of black folk in 1965, what's called the Affirmative Action Bill. When that came out, they put the moves on them, smother the issue again. Affirmative action was supposed to have been intended to correct those structural inequities between blacks and whites that have occurred as a direct result of all those years of things I'm talking about. As soon as the bill came out, whites immediately started changing it and black leadership bought it. The issue was supposed to be going this way. Watch how they flip the glasses upside down on it. The issue was supposed to be correcting historical discrimination, what has happened to blacks historically by racism and discrimination. They switched and said, let's not talk about historical, let's talk about present day and the future. You're supposed to have been dealing with racism, which means group-based. They said, no, forget about that, let's deal with individual discrimination. The issue was supposed to have been focusing on dealing with things that have happened to black folk. They changed it, no, let's deal with issues pertaining to everybody. Women, gays, handicapped, everything else. And when they did that, they destroyed affirmative action. Don't even waste your time even chasing affirmative action anymore. It's been destroyed. It was supposed to be helping black folk. Now, what the other groups did, they said now that somebody just put out a law to help black folk, how do we become equal to black? And that's when the Hispanics jumped up with this thing called Hispanic, the concept. Before that, we didn't have anything called Hispanics. But they thought in the early 60s that black folk might get something out of the civil rights movement. So what they did, they went to the table and came up with a whole term called Hispanic. They said, let's go all over the world and find everybody that speaks Spanish and pretend they're equal to black folk. And let's pretend that the Spanish language has been handicapped, Jim Crow, enslaved, hung, lynched, decapitated, and everything else, and therefore is entitled to be treated like a black person. And they fabricated a new race called Hispanic. So now that means any person coming from Spain, Portugal, Philippines, any place that I'm a Hispanic, I'm equal to black folk. And the worst part about it, and then every time you hear a report about poverty, they'll go compare Hispanic poverty with black poverty. Nobody ever stops and hold a second. You got to quit playing that game. You're smothering the issue. The poverty on black folk is poverty that's been there for 400 years. That's the same old poverty they've been dealing with for 400 years, and you got rolling poverty. You keep having Hispanics coming into the country and comparing the poverty they're bringing into this country with the poverty that's been with black folk for 400 years. Nobody wants to stop them from doing that. Now people say, well, they got yes, but that's poverty they bring in here with them. Black folk didn't bring poverty with them. It was given to us as a gift. If you were to go back to 1840s, where I was earlier talking about Uncle Tomism, back at that point in time, you did not have one single solitary Hispanic in the entire United States. But you had almost 5.5 million black folk that were enslaved, who had been enslaved for 250 years. You didn't have any Hispanics. By 1900, you had 100,000 Hispanics in the United States, but you got 11 million black folk. Now they got the same identical birth rate in 1900, up until today. Same identical birth rate. You got 100,000 Hispanics and 11 million black folk, and now they're gonna pass black folk. Now somebody who can count past 3 should say, hold a second. How can you only have 100,000 of them in 1900 at the same birth rate, and you got 11 million blacks and now passing blacks? Because 2 million every year walking across the border. It is not this country's responsibility to be correcting all their poverty. It is the country's responsibility to correct the poverty they put on people. The poverty, and see, if you go through history, you cannot find one single solitary instance where anybody else in this country have been denied access to the educational system, to the economic system, to the political system, to the social system, but black folk. Don't you let anybody compare themselves with you. And that's why I said a few minutes ago, use terms that isolate you and reconnect you with your history and give you a special uniqueness so that nobody can piggyback off of you. Use the word non-immigrants. If you're gonna do wrong right. You want to insist. For those in the audience who want to insist on using the word minority, then at least qualify and say we're the only involuntary minority, or we're the only planned minority. But don't use this term where it means everybody collectively, because the whole concept of minority means to confuse the issue and defuse any resources you could have gotten. Now, where does that come from as a minority? Let's deal with that concept a second. Now, at this point in time, black people have to understand in America, if you go back to the Constitution I was talking to you about earlier, the Federalist Papers were the document upon which the Constitution was drafted. The Federalist Papers said this, that if you're going to have a social democracy where the rule is that the majority will win and the minority will lose, then the majority has some obligations. First of all, if you use that social democracy that we're currently using, the majority have these obligations. One, it is the majority's responsibility to protect the rights of the minority. It is not your right as a minority to keep going out here marching and demonstrating. It is the dominant whites decided to make sure you got everything you need. That's their obligation. Point 2 in the Federalist Papers that gave the structure for the Constitution, it also says that if you use a social democracy like we have in the United States, that you cannot do anything to stop the minority from becoming the majority. And immediately after that Constitution went into effect, within a year, they enacted the immigration law to put a zero quota on blacks to make sure they stay a minority. They violated the Constitution in 1 year to make sure that you become a permanent minority. And I have not heard one black legal scholar in the United States make that an issue. None of them made it an issue. That's inappropriate behavior on the part of our legal scholars in this country. And secondly, and thirdly, in the Federalist Paper, it says, and if you fail to protect, the majority fails to protect the rights of the minority, and if you do something to impede the minority from becoming the majority the same way you became the majority, then thirdly, that minority has no rights to abide by your laws and your rulings. Now think about that. Now I want to know where are all my black scholars and my black legal minds. Why aren't you displaying appropriate behavior and investigating that? Find out why it is that you got the minority running around trying to protect itself when you know good and well it doesn't have the power and the resources to do it. That's like trying to have a baby to look out for himself when you know he cannot go out and work a job and fix his own food. It's your obligation to take care of him. But nobody raised it as an issue in this country. Where all my black legal scholars should be raising issues over the fact that in this country, that the 13th Amendment that was given to black folk, that was supposed to free black folk, was never enforced. The Emancipation Proclamation was supposed to free blacks. That's what they say in the myth. But it wasn't. The Emancipation Proclamation by Lincoln was only to free those blacks that he had no authority over in the first place. He was talking about the blacks who are any black who's in a state that broke away from the United States, you're free. He doesn't have that authority, just broke away. Now the blacks he could have freed that were still in slavery on the north side, he didn't do anything about them. To this day, they never corrected that. So legitimately, they are still enslaved. Secondly, if you put out the 13th Amendment, freeing people, or let's go to the 14th Amendment. You go to the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment saying they hereby, forbade any kind of involuntary servitude. Then they stuck a clause in there, except when duly have been prosecuted and charged. You know what that means? What that meant was then that any white in the South who wanted to re-enslave black folk, all they do is come up with a charge and they can re-enslave them. And what the South did immediately after the 14th Amendment went into process, they passed what's called a black code in 1865 and 66. The black code then said that any black person who used to be a slave, who's now free, he must be able to show me he has a contract for employment in his hand by the 1st of January. Or therefore I can arrest you and charge you with vagrancy and put you back into a plantation and slave you again. Now all the people knew that. They didn't raise any cane about it. Today, that's still a part of our Constitution. I don't hear my black scholars. Where's the appropriate behavior? Now, why is that important now when I talk about appropriate behavior? Because now there's a bill on the Hill where the white conservatives now want to lay claim to the 14th Amendment and say they're going to write a law called Equal Opportunity Act. What they're going to say now is that bill can be used for whites too, so that you can now not infringe on their rights. And what black folks should have done, gone back to the slaughterhouse case in 1872, which said that the 14th Amendment was strictly written for black people. That's what, in other words, whites are using the 14th Amendment for reverse discrimination charges against black folk. Now, you all follow me through on this. How can you allow somebody, if something is written on this side to help save you from this guy, how can you let him take the same law and knock your brains out on the other side with it? Am I losing you all on this now? But so how can whites come around now and claim use of the 14th Amendment that was written to protect black folk from whites? And now whites are taking it, use it to hit blacks with it. Where are my black lawyers and judges? And you got a black sitting on the Supreme Court now, it keeps ruling, talking about he's a constitutional authority based on the Constitution. I'm just telling you, the Constitution is knocking our brains out. I don't need no more Constitution. So, but all these questions need to be raised in our court system about what's happening to us. And nobody's doing that. So in the bottom line, what I'm saying to you is that we got major problems in society, but we keep doing all these things wrong. We are poor and impoverished because we don't build communities, as I told you a few minutes ago. Secondly, we are the richest nation on earth outside of the United States as black folk. In the world, we are the 9th richest nation on earth. We got an annual disposable income of $382 billion. But we violate all the norms of economics as black folk. That's inappropriate behavior. Your money is supposed to bounce 8 to 12 times before it leaves your community. I'm gonna say that again. Black money is supposed to bounce 8 to 12 times. That means it must go through at least 8 to 12 black hands before it gets out of the Crenshaw neighborhood. 8 to 12 times, and it doesn't. Black money does not bounce one time. As soon as a black person gets paid, he's got this inexcusable denial in his mind, saying, as soon as I get paid, I'm gonna run over every other black and get into the suburbs to spend it in a white store, in a white mall. And the Jews, on the other hand, their money bounced 18 times before it leaves their community. You look at the discrepancy between one bouncing not once and one's bouncing 18 times. Black people right now spend 95% of their money outside of their own communities. They spend 5% in their communities. In their communities, they spend 3% of that with non-black owned businesses. Black folk try to live off of 2% of their disposable income. They keep 2% every year. Then they take that 2% and put it into a savings account, a bank, and then they can't even get a loan from the white bank they put it into. Now, anybody's right mind knows that it's humanly impossible for you to live off of 2% of your income. It can't be done, but we keep trying to do the impossible. Why do we keep trying to live off of 2% and you know it can't be done? So what happens then is every night, every black community in America goes bankrupt when the last non-black in a black community closes up the store, cleans out the cash register, and goes home. We go bankrupt from that night until the next morning. And the reason we're doing that, the reason we're so impoverished, is because other groups are also boycotting us. We don't have any business structures in our neighborhoods because others are boycotting you. As long as you live, you'll never see a white person because his money's bouncing in his own community. So he's not gonna let his money bounce in your community. So when he gets money, he keeps it. You don't see him getting in his car on a Saturday morning, like this morning, driving down to a black neighborhood, getting out of his car, going into a black store, buying a black-made product. He doesn't do that. If he does do that, I told y'all before, take a picture of it if you see it. It might be very valuable one day. Every black I know tries to get into Chinatown every Friday and Saturday evening. Have you ever seen Chinese trying to get into a black neighborhood to buy anything? Then why do you keep doing it? Inappropriate behavior. You keep doing everything inappropriately, backwards. You got to quit doing it. I'm not telling you to be mean against anybody. I'm not telling you to be against. I'm saying take care of your own people. Don't do what they're doing in slavery. And an instance of that, let me jump back into history again. On the eve of the Civil War, we had over 6,200 blacks in America that owned other slaves. 6,200 blacks were slave owners. Now, let me break that down a little more specific for if you don't understand what I'm talking about, not looking out for your own people, inappropriate behavior. Same thing out of Africa. They never changed all these things, still doing the same thing, and it's brainwashing, seeing things upside down. In New Orleans, for instance, in New Orleans, I only had 842 blacks in the city at the time. And out of the 842, 612 of them owned slaves. Because they thought they were of a different color. They called themselves Creole and mulatto, so they wouldn't enslave the rest of their people. And when blacks tried to break free in New Orleans, out in the parish, in Jefferson Parish, blacks went and joined the whites to put down a black revolt. And not only did they put it down, they helped slaughter the blacks. They chopped our heads off and put a head on a pole or something like every 100 yards, all leading all the way into New Orleans. That's inappropriate behavior of our people. Keep doing it in your own people. Then trying to find justifiable reasons. When the day you do the same thing, it's inappropriate behavior, same kind of behavior pattern, you're still killing your people. When I ask, why don't you go to a black store and spend your money at a black store? They said, Doctor, I want to go to his store. I want to go to his store. Why? I say, well, he sells it costs too much. He charges more than the guy 3 doors down. I said, who's the guy 3 doors down? Well, he's Chinese. I said, who's the guy? Well, he's black. See, that's inappropriate behavior because they don't understand what we call cost-benefit analysis, which means where are you getting the greatest benefit? Where do you get the greatest benefit for your race and your people and your money? If you go spend $1 with a black here and you go spend $1 with a white, and the white or the Chinese takes it out of his community and uses it against you. At some point, somebody's got to be home upstairs. You got to say, yes, it might cost me a few pennies more to buy from a black, but I get more in return. Particularly if I can get him to keep that money in his neighborhood and spend it with another black person. They said, well, what if his merchandise is bad? And you go down there and tell him. You go down there and tell him, let me tell you something. You got 6 months to clean up this place. You got 6 months to put in a better quality product. You got 6 months to start putting up better security and lighting in here. And you got 6 months to change your negative attitude. And hold them accountable. We must have an accountability system for our merchants and say you got a responsibility. Now I just got back from Detroit, Michigan last week, and my mother is old now and sort of senile, and my sister is also got some handicapping problems. She went down and bought a ham. And in Detroit, Michigan, almost all your key essentials are owned by whites, by Arabs. Your gas station, your food stores. She showed me a ham she was going to fix that day. And she said, this doesn't look right. She said, will you take a look at it for me? I looked at it, and it had that slime on it. I said, where'd you get that? She said, I got it from Savon's Arab store down the street there where they sell the groceries. And I'd already looked in there, and I could smell the rotten meat when I come in the store. And it's all the stores in the city, because they're not black-owned stores. I said, cut that ham open, let me see it. She cut the ham open, and you can almost see the pus oozing out of it. And said, I'm going back on the radio in about 2 days back in Detroit. I'm going to ask every black in that city to close down all those darn stores. They got to quit doing that to black folks. And they go over and buy old vegetables from the main supermarket and bring them to the black neighborhoods. And I said, some black leadership, and this city has got a black mayor, a black city council, a black chief of police, a black school superintendent, a black mayor. How can you let people sell your people? Like my mother, an 80-year-old woman, sell her infested rotten meat with maggots in it. Inappropriate behavior. And they keep saying, well, Dr. Anderson, we elected the blacks, they're going downtown, they're representing, then pull them out of office. You get people out of office, don't support anybody in your community that won't support you in the black community. I don't care what color he is. Pull them out of office. How do you pull them off? You pull them out of office through accountability, recalls, and if you can't get to them, boycott whoever puts them in office. We got to get wealth and power as quick as we can if we're going to survive. The time is running out. We need money. We don't need jobs, we need money. And in conclusion, there's one lady told me, she said, Dr. Anderson, she says, I love everything you say, but you got to quit talking about money all the time. I said, why? She said, because money is not everything. So I said, tell me what money is not. She said, well, money can't buy you love. I said, I'll tell you what. I said, without finance, it won't be any romance. She said, you know, you can make all those smart statements you want. I tell you what, I bet you money won't take you to heaven. I said, I tell you what, you let money take me as far as it can, I'll get off and walk the rest of the way. So in my last thing, she said, well, I'll tell you what. She says, I don't care what you say, Dr. Anderson. As far as I'm concerned, money is the root of all evil. I said, you're right. I said, because when I don't have any money and my people don't have anything, I am evil. Okay? So I thank you and I love you.
Because democracy basically means government by the people, of the people, for the people. But the people are retarded.
It's like this. The masses, the hungry people, they outweigh the rich. So as long as I appeal to the hungry and the poverty-stricken people, it's all good. I'm gonna have a job for life. It's these rich people who worried about the fooling the poor people. Everybody know what type of situation we in the streets. All I'm doing is showing you and telling you. Why get mad at the brother that bring you the news? Get mad at the person that's making it happen. Feel me?